This week's Shockwaves is brought to you by the upcoming science fiction thriller Morgan, opening in theaters on September 2nd. In the movie, a corporate risk management consultant has to decide and determine whether or not to terminate an artificial being's life that was made in a laboratory environment. To learn more about Morgan, head to Blumhouse.com, where you can check out the trailer and read about 5 things that really intrigue us about the movie. Again, Morgan is releasing to theaters on September 2nd.
Holy smokes, there you have it. I'm going to go watch the trailer right now, but...
Wow, Bekah.
You've convinced us, everybody in the room at least. Welcome to episode number 14 of Shockwaves. I'm one of your co-hosts, Rob Galluzzo. Sitting with me is Mr. Elric Kane, the man, the myth, the legend.
Back from the dead.
Back from the dead. The whole gang
posse.
is here. The whole gang is back together.
I'm excited.
Rebekah, McKendry.
I missed you guys
Rob, we were
last
doing
week.
all right on our own.
I thought we were all right, yeah. Ryan Turek right there.
Hello.
I thought it would have been awkward if I'd shown up and you had these two beautiful girls with you, and then I was like the third wheel.
We were doing all right without you.
Weird.
Lisa has the weird restraining order on me.
Especially after you tried to seduce her on the last show.
Tried?
It might have been the other way around. I'm not sure. But Felicia's a slippery one. Yeah. You know? But yeah, welcome back to the show. Thank you, everybody, for your feedback at home. Be sure to like us on Facebook and Twitter, and keep spreading the word. And obviously, we always start off talking about what we've seen in the last week. I've seen a few things, but who wants to go first? Because sometimes you guys have been gone for a few weeks now. So is there a lot on cue or what?
I have only a couple. But
you go, Kane.
All right, you want me to go?
Do it.
Go for it.
The first one I'm curious about, especially Ryan and Rob, if you guys have seen this one, Girls Night Out, the 80s slasher called The Scaremaker, a.k.a. Scaremaker.
Never heard of it.
No.
Never even heard of this.
You'll remember when I explain this image if you've seen it. It's the killer gets into the university's mascot, which is a bear, and goes around killing people in a bear costume and also with sharpening claws.
Sold.
Yeah,
It is. Who put this madness out?
I'm looking up the
I
box
saw it with Shane
cover
Bitterling
now.
and Dick, and it's from the 80s. What's funny about it is Hal Holbrook is kind of billed as the star, and he never appears with the rest of the cast, and they didn't film him until after the movie was completely shot, and then they hired him, brought him in for a couple scenes because his son had a small role in it. And it's it's one of those movies where the performance style is, if you're in this movie, you better act as big as you can in hopes that the camera saw you,
right,
and then you're off screen. And we were literally stopping laughing every 5 minutes because it was so theatrical at times, because they're so desperate to be noticed. But it's got some scenes, literally, with a giant bear.
Wait a minute, back up. So who put this out?
Seen this box
I don't know. This has been out for a while. This was a DVD, so Bitterling sometimes will get Code Red stuff. I don't believe it was a Code Red one, but it wasn't a new release. It wasn't like a Blu-ray.
Yeah, this box
Still looked
cover,
good.
I've never even seen this before.
Yeah, The Scaremaker's a much better title. I think Girls Night Out's like a terrible title for a movie like this.
Girls Night Out.
Girls Night Out. I mean, that's pretty bad.
1982.
Yeah.
Wow.
So I posted that night, as soon as I saw it, I posted a picture of the bear saying I saw it with a killer bear, and a lot of people wrote in saying, "Oh yeah, Girls Night Out, love that movie." I was like, I don't know about that one, but
love that movie. Oh, with Julia Montgomery, who was in Revenge of the Nerds.
Was she the blonde?
Yeah, she's the blonde cheerleader, the one
that's
that's
right. I
Oh,
think they pointed that out while they were
yeah.
watching it.
It's pretty funny.
It's not a great slasher, but I will say it's actually got a genuinely creepy ending. And when you get to that, like a lot of those films, they have a kind of a fun, bizarre twist at the end. That was interesting. I saw one of the Oscar nominees for last year for a foreign film was this weird Amazonian horror film called kind of horror, kind of weird. Herzog Jodorowsky kind of style called Embrace of the Serpent, and it's starring
that's right.
Borgman.
They played at Sundance.
Yeah, remember Borgman, the movie Borgman? So the star of it is literally Borgman, and he looks exactly the same. He has the same beard, but he's in the Amazon jungle. It stretches over about like a 90-year period, two different timelines. But the last act of it is really haunting, surreal. The first 2/3 I wouldn't call a horror film. It's kind of like, art house Amazon, like very much like a Herzog movie. But the last act is really interesting, and I think it's for people who didn't get maybe like my kind of non-Green Inferno love. Maybe this is an antidote to your Amazon movie that you've been looking for in black and white for 2.5 hours, if you have that in you. And I saw Mickey Keaton's Darling.
Oh.
Oh, Elric.
What?
He's not won you over yet, huh?
Oh, Roman Polanski's Repulsion is a great film. I love that film. I'm a big fan of it. This film, the titles were really well designed. I like the pink against the New York skyline. There's some really nice visual design in the movie. But the storyline...
Brian Collins?
Oh, is that Brian? I don't know if it was Brian, actually. That's a good question. It definitely runs too close. But you'll like this. My favorite of his films. Having seen Carnage Park and Pod Only, I did... Even though it was way too close to Repulsion for me to feel original, it was put together nicely. It was a very simple, very focused film. I thought it was shot very well, but it's so hard when a movie is so close to something else you really love to really judge it on its own, because it has the same central storyline and conceit. So you're like, I don't, But I definitely, of the ones I've seen of his films, I thought it was the best. And finally. So we use the word bonkers a lot. I notice all of us do. We'll talk about some crazy movie and we go, oh, that movie's bonkers. We are literally going to have to stop using the word bonkers so as we can save it only for this movie, because Greasy Strangler is straight. There's literally no other word on the planet to describe what I witnessed when I watched Greasy Strangler.
Is it on VOD now?
No, it's not.
I knew it was releasing soon.
It is starring the star of the video Dead. So when your movie has the star from a movie from 20 years ago who was in one scene of the Video Dead, the opening, and they literally bill it, Michael St. Michael's from Video Dead. I'm like, so I watched, of course, Video Dead this morning. I watched the opening. I'm like, oh, that's his only scene. This movie is fucking bonkers, and I'm going to give you a context that you can understand.
Oh, yeah, man.
Let me break this down. You know where this film resides in a universe. Imagine an entire film set in the penis-throwing sequence of Street Trash.
Oh, my
And that
gosh.
is Greasy Strangler.
Oh, yeah.
Wow.
That is literally... So while that penis is flying through the air, I feel like they made Greasy Strangler. And when the penis landed and Bryan Singer caught it, because he was the penis wrangler, it is really, literally looks like a weird time capsule from that time period. The humor is exactly like that. It's like Street Trash, John Waters.
Trauma. It's a little
bit
Adult
of trauma,
Swim,
but a little more
bit
adult.
of trauma.
It's pretty adult.
It's polished.
Weird.
It's polished for trauma.
Yeah,
it's like a polished trauma movie.
And it's not. I wouldn't even bring it. Honestly, first half, I wouldn't have even brought it up in a horror context. But it literally does have this monster coming throughout the movie, even though it's not scary. No. There is this greasy monster killing people, and it's got moments. There was a moment about 20 minutes in where I laughed more than I've laughed all year. But a lot of other parts where you're just silent, watching really weird shit go down. You're like. I don't know if it's meant to be funny here, but there's a couple lines. It is a unique movie.
It is.
Put that on the box, Ann Timpson. Put Elric Says. This is one unique.
This is one unique movie.
Bonkers.
But no,
Bonkers.
really, I think people will enjoy it.
The penis scene of Street Trash.
I think that's a perfect warning.
That's the great.
The airborne penis of Street Trash made this movie.
That scene. Oh, the other movie, kind of just a little bit like Blood Diner. A little bit like Blood Diner's humor. It's also like that, where it's just it's not for everyone, but then it's so unique. That director, I've never seen his other stuff. I have to assume his shorts have that exact tone. Otherwise, he could never have gotten that made. It's so specific.
Wow.
So weird. It's so
wow.
weird.
What about you, Bekah?
So movie-wise, I watched Southbound, which I really enjoyed. Cool. Specifically, I loved the segment, if you guys have seen it, the surgical one, I'll call it, which I think is Bruckner's. Yeah, that's the one that everybody was raving about, but it's the one the whole time where I was like, holy crap, this is intense. So that segment alone is worth watching the movie, so I highly recommend checking it out. And then because...
Is it on Amazon Prime now? Is that how you watch it?
Yes, it is Prime.
I think it's on there.
Yeah, so...
I thought it was on Netflix now. I thought it had just hit.
Maybe. But I remember it had an exclusive window on Amazon Prime, if I'm not mistaken.
It's definitely on Prime right now. And then because I had 2 long plane rides and was at my dad's house for a stretch, I watched TV shows. So I took the slasher one that was released by Scream Factory. It's a Canadian show, but it's recently been airing on Chiller. And I think it's also streaming on Netflix right now. So I started watching that, and I was honestly kind of skeptical about whether or not I would like it, because slashers aren't necessarily my favorite subgenre of horror. I still like them a lot better than some, but it's not what I gravitate towards, I'll say.
Right.
And I've seen Scream and all of the other kind of slashery TV shows that have come out recently, and I was kind of curious if it was something that they would be able to kind of sustain, and I really liked it. So
we should have some words then, because I talked about this a few months ago.
Yes, you did. I remember when you first watched it, and I will say,
I thought the pilot was great, and then I thought it nosedived so fast. But I watched because it was only like 6 episodes, and I was like, well, I need to know who the killer is at this point.
Yeah, and I have not watched the last episode yet, but I'm still into it. I mean, I thought it got sleazy and kind of trashy.
Yes, very much so.
But I'm still kind of there. It got like Amityville 2 trashy. Like,
it's really trashy. It's really trashy. But you know what's interesting? So I wrote an article back when I first watched it on the website, and also we were about maybe 2 or 3 episodes into season 2 of Scream, and my article at the time, which I'll now retract, was, you know, why are people so? I'm curious why people are obsessed with making the slasher formula try to work for TV, because I thought Scream season 1 was really good for what it was. It was what I kind of hoped Scream 4 would be, which is kind of like newer characters, an update on it, but not the exact same thing. And, you know, not to say that it wasn't flawless, but I kind of really dug it. I mean, it's more for a younger audience and obviously an MTV audience, but I really like Scream. And then I started watching Slasher, and I thought the pilot was so strong, like really good, and kind of like really violent.
It's
and fucked
really
up for what
fucking
it is.
brutal.
And then like the second or third episode, there's so many like terrible character decisions, and then it goes for sleaze where it's like, oh, all right. And at that point, I was just trucking through because I'm like, well, I need to know who it is, you know? And Scream actually rebounded so hardcore on season 2 because the first 3 episodes I thought were spinning wheels because they didn't let any of the main characters know that there was a new killer. So in essence, it's like, well, why does anyone care if nobody knows there's a threat yet? But once they reveal that there's somebody else involved from episode 3, from there to the end, I thought it was really strong and almost better than season 1, because instead of redoing what they did in season 1, now they're playing with the conventions of a sequel. And it was funny, and I hope we can talk about this candidly at some point, either with somebody from the show or one of the directors of the show, because to the point where they redid stuff in season 2 that makes me want to rethink and rewatch season 1. Because I'm like, they couldn't have possibly had that planned all along.
Right.
And Starry Eyes guys had a good episode.
They killed it.
Yeah, that's what I read.
Well, our friends, I mean, Ty West did one. Rodman Flender did one for season 1 and 2. The guys from Starry Eyes, Dennis Widmeyer and Kevin Kolsch, did an episode of season 2, and it was great. And like you could tell, there's a character that's buried alive in a coffin in the episode that they did. That's not a spoiler at all. And they did some really creative stuff where he keeps hallucinating and like he's in this dark space and keeps seeing characters kind of come into the light.
Oh, cool.
To talk to him, and you could totally tell that was a director's choice from them, like the way that they chose to execute it. So I thought they killed it. And then of course, by the time they got to the end, I just felt like there's no reveal that could be satisfying, and yet it totally was. I was like, oh, all right, that's pretty cool.
Okay, I need to go back
now
and
I
watch
don't think
Scream.
they could. I don't know if they could do a 3rd season now. I feel like they've played all their cards they possibly could. But you know what? That's interesting. If they haven't been picked up for one yet. I think I read Brian Collins wrote an article saying they're doing a Christmas special. They're doing a one-off Christmas special or something like that. But they haven't been picked up for a 3rd season. Although I can't imagine they wouldn't, because it's huge, and I DVR'd it, so every time an episode ended, there's a whole hour thing after of people talking about it. So it must be huge for MTV.
I didn't make it past the first few episodes of Scream. And the only reason I was able to continue through all of Slasher was that it was so short, and I only have 1 episode left on it. But I guess it was probably the sleaze factor that kept me going, just because I was like, oh, this just got crazy. I'm going to keep going with it. But
Could I just skip season 1 and just jump into season 2?
Of Scream?
Yeah.
You'd be a little lost.
Would I?
Yeah, because
I just couldn't get into it.
That was it. I tried like 3 episodes of Scream, and I was like,
Netflix
this is just
now.
taxing.
It is, yeah.
Now is the way to just marathon it, because I really thought
work.
it. Yeah, but it's
From a guy who said made Still Screaming or whatever.
I know.
That's the thing. Hey, I watched it opening night.
Yeah.
Like I watched it when it first aired, and I realized that Scream had officially been bestowed to another generation and a younger generation, And I was just like, you know what? They're speaking a different language, man.
Yeah.
Like, I can't. Bella Thorne walks into this house and is like, lights, music, blah, blah, blah. And then, like, all of a sudden, this pop-up ads are popping up on the screen telling us what we're watching or what we're listening to. And I'm like, what is happening? Like, drool just started coming out of my mouth.
Well, I mean,
but I heard great. But you guys have been enthusiastic about
I've
season
been pretty
2.
enthusiastic. And then, season 2 is really good. And then, I got a shout out to John Carna, who plays Noah on the show for both seasons, who's kind of the Randy character of the show. And apparently, as listener of Killer POV, hopefully he listens to Shockwaves as well.
Yeah.
According to Rodman Flender, who turned him on to our show.
That's awesome.
So, I dug it.
Well, the other show that I'll talk about, which I highly recommend, like seriously, this has been one of the best treats I've had in months watching. It's a British TV show called Inside Number 9. And you all are looking at me, so I'm assuming I'm the only one who's seen this. It aired first in 2014, and it is a British dark horror. I can't even call it horror. It's a dark comedy, but every single one of them has a really sharp horror turn at the end. And some of them have it throughout. And the whole concept of it, it's an anthology show, and each one is set inside a building that's number 9. So it might be set in a castle or a mansion or an apartment. And so each of the locations is number 9. But that's the only thing that connects them. The actors are all the same, too. It uses the same actors in all the different segments, who are apparently a very well-known comedy troupe in the UK.
Yeah, it's Reese Shearsmith.
Yeah,
who was in he was in The Cottage, a movie called The Cottage, and then he was also in Shaun of the Dead.
Yeah, and if you watch the show, you're going to see a lot of recognizable faces where you're like, oh, I saw that guy in, and like I was a big fan of The Mighty Boosh, and I saw some of the same faces from that. But because it's a British TV show, the seasons are only like 6-7 episodes long, and I just like binged watched the entire first season. And don't go in expecting a bloody, gory horror. It is dark comedies that all have this incredibly high Hitchcockian tension that always takes this really horrific twist at the end. And it's just really, like, there was one episode that was entirely silent. And it was about two criminals breaking into this millionaire's home, and he and his wife are home, but they're not speaking to each other because they're clearly like separating, and the maid's there, but she doesn't talk to anybody there. So it's like you've got all these different people moving around the house, and it's completely silent for a full half an hour. And it was absolutely genius. And then it gets really horrific at the end.
I'm looking at it's gone on for 3 seasons, it looks like. And Guillaume Morales, who directed Julia's Eyes, did a couple episodes of that.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Spanish director.
It's just such a smart show, and I'm really enjoying it. And
Where did you see it?
It's on Amazon. You do have to pay for the episodes, but they're only like $2 a piece. And again, so like the first season, I think may have been like $10, and it was totally worth it. So yeah, I highly recommend checking it out. Again, you're not going to go in and see, it's not going to be a slasher from the get-go, but they all get really dark and twisted.
Right.
Cool.
That's cool.
So check it out, guys.
Nice.
What about you, Ryan? Anything you want to talk about from this week?
I watched Mardi Gras Massacre.
Oh my!
Is that a new film?
Holy cow.
No, that's an old one.
No, it's a 1978 slasher that it was recently released by Code Red, I think.
Probably. I like how we're dumping all the crap that you haven't heard of.
I'll look it up while we're doing all this. But this guy, Jack Weiss, directed it, and it's. I bought it cold. I had seen it. Oh God! Like during my kind of like VHS binges of Discoveries when I was really little, and I don't remember anything from it. But I was buying Cemetery Man from Diabolic DVD because Cemetery Man is now officially on Blu-ray.
Oh, I just ordered
It's
that
about
too.
freaking time.
3D version on there too.
There's
It's
a
all
3D
region.
version.
What?
Yeah, I
it's
can't.
an
That's why I was
I
like,
can't even
sold.
imagine that movie in 3D. That sounds amazing.
Yeah. So I was buying that, and I was like, "Oh, look at Mardi Gras Massacre!" Bye. And I watched it over the weekend, and it is a piece of work.
I know what you're talking about now.
Dude, this
Okay.
movie is crazy. So basically, the concept is there's a killer who is hunting women just before Mardi Gras and sacrificing them to like a Mayan deity or something like that. And what he does is he goes to like strip clubs, and he goes and tries to pick up hookers, and then he asks them. And asks other people in the bar, I need evil women. I need women who are evil. And if you go to my Instagram page, there's this great moment where he like walks up to this girl, or he's got this girl at his house, and he goes, are you evil? And she's like, honey, I'm about as evil as you can get. And he's like, let's not waste any more time. And he takes her off to his sacrifice room, and then he kills her. And then through this, there's this story about a cop who falls for a hooker who was the friend of one of the victims at the beginning of the movie. And she's basically an informant. And worst cop, worst detecting ever. He saves her, and then she pays him back, if you catch my drift.
Oh, yeah.
And then she's like, you probably want me out, don't you? And he's like, no, actually, I kind of like this. So they go. So it's like a 5-minute fucking montage of them gallivanting around New Orleans, having dinner.
So it's like a Pretty Woman situation.
A little bit, until she discovers for some reason that he's a 2-timing loser, and she doesn't deserve to be with him, and then she leaves him.
Wait, wasn't he the protagonist of the movie?
Sort of.
Okay.
It's
but he's the cop. Rob, you have it pulled up. Is it who's the publisher?
I'm trying to figure out who it is still.
And it's a very repetitive, very gory, very there's there's a little bit of vagina.
How's
there's
it compared to Dr. Butcher?
Well, no, if you
Oh God, this is subpar,
Subpar than Dr. Butcher?
Somewhere
in the basement of Dr. Butcher.
Somewhere in the kind of septic tank of Dr. Butcher.
So the penis was flying from street trash, and below that, in the gutters behind Chud, under Chud.
It's something. But what's funny is because it's so repetitive, you get a kick out of him basically bringing these girls home, smooth talking them, and then getting them into a sacrifice chamber, and then he cuts their hand, cuts their feet, and then he oils them up. Yeah. And then he slices them open and tears their heart out, and it's very HG.
Yeah. It is. Well, actually, it is a blood feast ripoff.
Yeah, I just read that it is
a very loose. Remake
Big
of that.
Time.
I think it's Code Red. Here's a funny thing: we're at the Blumhouse offices, and Diabolic DVD is blocked.
There's a block
from our internet. We can't. I don't know why we can't.
The IT doesn't allow us to go to Diabolic DVD.
Have you been abusing Ryan? Is that it? You've just been staying on their page.
Really early on.
Weird question. Site.
I have never.
This is the best ad for them ever.
Yeah.
They are so hardcore. Blumhouse has to block them.
I have never had a site blocked from this office before.
No, there's a couple sites that are blocked from the whatever they call it. But I talked to our IT guy, and I'm like, dude, come on, really?
Diabolic
this a Diabolic DVD. You can't
buy from there all the time.
Yeah.
But the bonus features. There's a interview with the lead actor who's the killer, and it's a fun, sweet little interview for the first 5 minutes, and then it starts to get really boring. But the great story is he says that one of the girls he had to kill, she was one of the first patients to get breast implants. Wow. And this is 1978. Yeah. And he was like, yeah, she was one of the first girls to get boob implants. And so when she arrived on set, they had hardened so much that they felt like rocks. Huh. And he was like, it was surreal. He goes, it was not, he knew that there's definitely not anything healthy about this whatsoever, And when you watch the film, you can see a little bit of evidence of that. But
I love how busy a guy you are, but you still take your time to watch a movie like that and come on our show. I just value that. I think that's important.
Well, I'm trying to make more time either on a Saturday or a Sunday to just
to watch pure crap.
To watch, you know what? And there's
Dr. Butcher last week.
Honestly, yeah, Dr. Butcher last week, and the week before that there was something else. This week is probably going to be Microwave Massacre.
I was going to ask you to borrow it.
You got to add.
I have to watch that.
Add Hellhole to that list, please.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know about Hellhole.
If you made it through Dr. Butcher, Hellhole's a piece of cake.
But I also watched some good stuff. I revisited The Gate, which is on Shudder. That was a good, perfect Saturday afternoon movie. And then last night, I don't know, there was something that me and Ciara, we just got a bug up our ass to watch Lost Boys. Mm-hmm. So it was just honey, we're watching Lost Boys tonight.
That's cool.
Lost Boys is perfection. It is a perfect movie. It is so good. You cannot watch that movie and not see those kids riding their motorbikes across the beach with the music, charging them along and go, nah, this movie sucks. It is a perfect movie. It is so well done, and there's such nuances to the writing. Right from the get-go, when they arrive at the grandfather's house, there's a lot of dismissive dialogue that I think people just overlook because it's kind of setting Diane Weist's character and her divorce and the kids and it's no. This is great.
It's one of those films when I
So
saw it,
good.
the twist, obviously no spoilers given that everyone's seen this movie, but when you realize that the guy dating the mom turns out to be bad, I remember being like literally shocked by that. And as a kid, like, because I never would have thought, because that casting, you know?
Oh, yeah.
I watched it with the kid last night, and she picked it off right away.
Wow.
She's
Much
brighter than
savvier
I
than
was.
us.
She was like, yeah. She, I think it was around the time that he was like, "This is my dog Thorn." And she's like, "He's a vampire." And I was like,
You've
"Oh."
already corrupted her too quick.
Wow.
Well, you know, it's funny. I've also had Lost Boys on the mind, ironically enough. Not because of the show announcement.
There's a new show,
There's
yeah.
like right before they announced it, I was like, man, I really want to see Lost Boys again. You know what it was? I put on another, I can't remember what company put it out, but I put on a DVD or Blu-ray, whatever, and a trailer, don't laugh, a trailer for Lost Boys The Thirst came on, which
Oh, no,
is
we're gonna
the
laugh.
third one.
No, the third one.
With
Wait,
the
the
Frog
Tribe.
Brothers? No, the Tribe is the second one.
Okay.
I saw the second one, which isn't really good because it's just like a remake of the first, but
Yep.
I vaguely remember like a super hot chicken. So I was like, oh, maybe I should see that again. But anyway, I went to find the Lost Boys and I was like, oh, I never saw Lost Boys 3. And I know the sequels are terrible, but on Amazon right now, there's a triple feature of all 3 Lost Boys movies for $10.
Oh, yeah.
Whereas the
Yeah.
first one's like $8. And I double checked and it's like all the same discs, all the special features are on it and stuff. So I was like, I'll buy the trilogy for 10,
You're
whatever.
getting the first one for $9.50, the other 2 for a quarter each.
There you go. That's
That's how you rationalize it.
So I just bought these 3 to do a little marathon of it. And Ryan, to go back really quickly to Mardi Gras Massacre, I just went, if Scott Reynolds is listening, believe it or not, I saw this movie on the big screen because it showed, I believe, I want to say at the Cine Family when they were doing one of their month-long, weirdo Halloween movies that will never play anywhere else. Yeah. And I remember it was like a midnight screening. I was like, I can't do it. And my friend Scott's like, when are you ever in your life going to see Mardi Gras Massacre on the big screen? And I was like, all right, let's go.
It's true.
So that's how I witnessed it.
And I bet you felt
I had never forgotten it since.
You felt whole.
I felt like I could have gotten sleep, but I didn't. I saw that instead.
But I mean, like now I own Mardi Gras Massacre, so I'm just like, all right.
It might have been worth it for
It's just fun.
the boob story, the fake boob history right there.
Can you imagine how great a film festival we could program if it was all the massacre movies? Anything that ends in massacre,
Yeah,
Nail Gun
Microwave
Massacre,
Massacre.
Texas Chainsaw Microwave, Wood Chipper. I mean, you would have like the craziest 20-hour film festival
Slumber
in history.
Party Massacre.
Slumber Party,
Ooh,
yeah, 1,
yeah.
2, 3.
Yeah.
Sorority House Massacre. I mean,
Oh, yeah.
you could
Well, the
probably
funny-
go on for a week.
Well, the funny thing is that Microwave Massacre showed up, and then the next day it was Mardi Gras, and Alex and her friend was like, "What the heck is going on?"
Your Martin
Is this a
Massacre
what
collection.
Blumhouse
I
is
know.
going to do?
Some of the assistants were like, "Wow, it looks like some priority viewing." I'm like, "No, this is gold, gold."
Well, there's a theater for sale in Burbank that Dave keeps convincing me that we need to get from Micro
that's
Cinema.
right, yeah.
He wants you to come in as a partner
I'm
on it,
in, I'm
Elric.
in.
So we've got
Like I
our
haven't
first
learned my
weekend
lesson.
preview right there is our Massacre Marathon.
Would you guys
Marathon.
come to a week-long massacre?
I would
marathon?
come. I would be first in
Well,
line.
let's just do it.
Nail Gun
No,
Massacre.
Let's try to figure. Let's
All right,
try to
let's
figure this
figure
out.
joining us out
Massacre
there. Let us
Festival.
know if you would
Slumber
come.
Party.
Blumhouse presents. Shockwaves.
Blumhouse.com
I'll
presents.
work on it. I'll work on it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Slumber
It would be
Party,
nuts. There's a lot.
Microwave, Mardi Gras.
We got to end with
There's
Texas
many.
Chainsaw
Yep.
Massacre.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah.
That'd be the
Absolutely.
That's
yeah.
That's your reward.
That's after sitting through Microwave and Mardi Gras, you get Texas Chainsaw.
All right. Was there anything else you saw, Ryan?
No, but I just wanted to say really quick, how cool is it that Salem's Lot's finally coming to Blu-ray?
Yeah.
That's what I'm most
that,
excited
And what
about.
were the other two?
Cat's
It was
Eye.
Cat's Eye
Mm-hmm.
and one other.
One
And
more.
It.
Oh, It, yeah.
So
Yeah.
three Stephen King
Really
movies.
cool.
Now,
all
you
on
don't know if
Blu-ray.
it's because I remember we tried when we were going to try to play Salem's Lot at Jump Cut, and Mike was desperate to find some British cut that was longer.
Yeah, because no, it's not that it's longer. Because here in America, it was a miniseries, so
Right.
you'd get that 2 VHS set. But what they
truncated.
did is they cut it theatrically UK.
Right.
So it's a shorter movie, but because it was theatrical, I believe there's some like slightly more violent, gorier bits that Toby Hooper put in. As of right now, there's no info on those Stephen King releases except a little sticker that says features new Toby Hooper commentary. So at the very least, we know that Toby did a new commentary track for Salem's Lot, which is super cool.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Nice.
So, okay. So really quickly, just a few things I wanted to mention. Number one, I saw a movie that, one of the advantages of us being able to do what we do is sometimes we get to see movies a little bit earlier than than most do. And I have a friend named Jamie Bernadette, who is an actress and writer, and she's actually going to be in the new I Spit on Your Grave movie, the official sequel to the original, not these like remake.
The one that
they're
has
on,
Camille
like-
Keaton
Camille
actually
Keaton
in
returns
it.
into
Yeah.
it. And
There's
she
a
actually,
lot of like little sequels.
Yeah, no,
that
this
are-
is from the original director of the original,
Okay.
and Camille Keaton's back,
Mirror.
and this girl Jamie plays her daughter in this version of it. But anyway, she just finished a new movie called The Sixth Friend, and it's about to go on the festival circuit. Asked me if I'd take a look at it and what I thought, and it was super cool. It was directed by a female director named Latia Klauston, and what I liked about this was it's a contained film about six friends. It kind of opens up in the first 5 minutes at like they're all having a party together and they decide that they're all going to trip out at the same time. It's like, let's do it together and all this stuff. So it's got like this pretty cool, like weird, like artsy drug fueled opening. But there's like this kind of sleazy guy there with tattoos that brought the drugs and all that kind of stuff. And then
The Turek of the piece.
The Turek of the piece.
You just got sleazy.
And then
I don't know why I started getting the sleazy.
I don't know. You got the tats,
but then it abruptly cuts because something violent and terrible happens at this party, but you don't know what it is. It kind of cuts ahead, and now it's I don't know if it's like a year later or whatever, but the six of them are getting together again at a kind of like a remote cabin to kind of try to mend their friendship, because whatever this thing is that happened, it just tore them apart completely. And it's kind of cool because they keep seeing kind of a masked kind of character out there stalking them. So at least aesthetically, it's not like The Descent, but it felt like The Descent in the sense that it's just like six female characters. And then it's got a little touch of Halloween because there's like this guy, and is it like, are they really seeing it? Is it part of the drug fuel trip, etc.? So I thought it was really interesting and a fun movie, and what I would pair it up with, because it's really hard for modern movies to kind of capture the old school slashers that we liked. A few months ago, I mentioned Anthony de Blasi's new movie, Most Likely to Die, which to me felt like kind of a perfect encapsulation of a 90s slasher movie. This would be a perfect double bill with that. It's kind of got that vibe to it. So, again, it's probably a little while from coming off, but I wanted to put it on all your radars, and to anybody listening, you guys should definitely be on the lookout for that one.
What's it called again?
It's The Sixth Friend, and I believe there's like a Facebook page set up for it, and I don't know, hopefully we'll see the trailer soon and everything too. But other than that, two more quick plugs. Tony Giles, who's a good friend of the shows, he was on episode 1 and does the Damn Fine podcast. Those guys, him and his co-host Scott Johansson, have launched several shows that are all kind of music themed. It's all if you subscribe to the Damn Fine cast, you get all of them. They're all in the same feed, which is interesting. And he has a new show called 5578, which I was the first guest on. And it kind of goes outside of soundtracks to talk a little bit more about music in depth. But this week, episode 3, he interviews Ludrium, aka Cody Carpenter. And, we don't really get to hear much from Cody. Obviously he's on tour with his father, John. He's part of the live John Carpenter band. And from what my experience is, he seems like a very shy, kind of soft-spoken guy. But Tony did the first kind of legit interview with him, and it's the first podcast he's ever done. And I listened to it on the way here, and I found it really fascinating getting to hear his perspective of what it's like to have John Carpenter as your dad. And kind of he talks a little bit about how the whole Lost Themes thing came about and their working relationship together. So I recommend checking out his show.
Speaking of podcast feedback, I've heard from a number of people who have actually contacted, who I never hear from, literally leave me phone message. Oh man, that Fetty episode you guys did was like my favorite podcast.
Yeah, I
ever.
got a lot of
like I think they're really
emails on that
a lot
one.
of people were really impassioned.
That's awesome.
So what I would ask of you is, because this will come out on Friday, make sure you support his movie.
Go see
Yes,
because
Jeffrey.
I really want to see
breathe.
that movie at the top of the
Yeah.
spot this weekend.
Absolutely.
You know?
That's
And also, if you like an episode, share it.
Yes.
Share it.
Please
Share it
do.
via Facebook.
Share the
Twitter.
love.
Tell everybody about
That's
it.
a good point, Ryan. Thank you. I was just thinking about Fetty.
And last but not least, to lead us into the interview section, what earlier on in the show, Ryan and I would play some. Oh, hi, we're live. Ryan and I would play music themes sometimes, stuff from soundtracks or stuff that
right.
we've bought before. We haven't done that in a while, but earlier this week on Blumhouse.com, I wrote a piece about Montauk Chronicles, which is the docudrama that Chris Garetano, friend of ours, made.
Love Chris
he did
Garetano.
The documentary Horror Business. And the reason I bring up why I think it's relevant is because right now, like obviously Stranger Things is like the biggest thing, on Netflix. Everyone's talking about it, and everyone's talking about the score to Stranger Things. It's got like this great 80s style synth score. The theme of Montauk Chronicles is very much based on a lot of the stories from the Montauk experiments, which are loosely what they culled from for the show. But anyway, there is a similar score on Montauk Chronicles by Crystal Cordero. And I think it's really cool. And I like supporting little indie stuff. And if you want to check it out, we're going to play a little snippet of a track called Beginning the Adventure, which is the kind of the main theme of it. But if you want to pick it up, it's on Bandcamp, and you can go to mtkchronicles.com and check out the movie too. It's really weird. It's kind of maybe I guess you could compare it to The Nightmare in the sense that it's mostly documentary where they talk to people that either were involved in the Montauk experiments, and there's some pretty weird, scary people. And then some of the stories they tell, then he shoots narrative sequences as if they're a horror movie and kind of goes back and forth between the two. So it's a cool little movie. But yeah, let's play a little snippet from that, and then we'll be back with our guests.
Once again, this week's Shockwaves is brought to you by the sci-fi thriller Morgan, opening in theaters on September 2nd. In Morgan, a corporate troubleshooter, played by Kate Mara, is sent to a remote top-secret location where she is to investigate and evaluate a terrifying accident. She learns the event was triggered by a seemingly innocent human who presents a mystery of both infinite promise and incalculable danger. Morgan is the directorial debut of Luke Scott, son of Ridley Scott, and has a great cast including Kate Mara, Anna Taylor-Joy, not to mention Jennifer Jason Leigh, Toby Jones, Brian Cox, and Paul Giamatti. If you haven't seen it, please go check out the trailer right now. It's a chilling glimpse at what happens when science goes too far. What is Morgan? Find out in theaters on Friday, September 2nd. Don't miss it.
Now, joining us on the show, we have Josh Miller and Mark Fortin. Hi, guys.
Hello, Ryan.
Now, this is Ryan talking, if anybody doesn't know.
We're all still here.
It's not Elric, it's not Becca, it's not Rob. It's
Nobody
Ryan.
bailed.
You sound just like me, Ryan.
Yeah, exactly. I don't want anybody freaking out. Now, listen, this is a very important episode because, I was at the Stanley Film Festival. Josh is laughing. I love you guys. You guys are the best. I think you guys are talented as hell. And it all stems from sitting at the Stanley Hotel, seeing the Final Girls unravel on the big screen.
I was at that screening.
You were at the screening with Barbara Crampton sitting next to me, and Barbara going, "Oh, it's a movie about scream queens," and I'm like, "Yeah, Barbara, this is gonna touch your heart. I think this is gonna be something special." And sure enough, it was. She loved it, and I loved it, and I was like, first off, I need to know everybody who's involved in this movie and let them know I love it. And then, being in the position I'm at Blumhouse, it was easy. It made it possible. So actually, I think what was interesting is that you guys already had a meeting on the books with Big Blum. And I was like, oh, it's these guys.
That's what we call him around the office.
No.
Bombshell. Okay. Dread Central's already writing about it.
Don't you start getting all sleazy over there, Elric. sleazy.
Listen, I've seen those pants.
I wish I could tell you what he told me he did before he went to Brazil, but I don't know if that's terrible.
No. But anyways, welcome to the show, guys. I'm glad you're both on.
Thank you for having us.
And, as is the format with the show, we wanted to kind of have you on because obviously you guys are horror fans. You have a little horror history in your blood. You talk horror as much as I do, on social media, and I love it. But, I just wanted to, how do you guys want to start? You want to kind of go back with the usual...
Yeah, the beginning is always the best for us. Like I say this almost every week. We're, of course, of the VHS generation. And I think there's always something appealing, when you're and cable. Obviously, I remember when HBO was a thing. And
how about Z Channel?
See,
Z
you
Channel.
were
I was
LA
East
has
Coast, so we
Z
didn't
Channel.
have that. But I love that documentary.
Yeah.
That was the gateway. Sorry, go ahead. We can talk about Z Channel.
But there you
later.
go. So. What was the beginning for you guys in terms of finding films and falling in love with films? Z Channel.
What was the beginning of falling in love with movies for us? I would say, I come from a family of people in the movies. Mm-hmm. So I think it was sort of a natural to be brought up adoring movies. And I think obviously horror was a big part of movies that my family made or were in. And I can remember being, 6 years old, and The Exorcist started, was on TV, which is hard to imagine, but it was. And my dad played Father Karras, Jason Miller, and I didn't get to see a lot of my dad early on in my life for various reasons we won't go into. But I think the issue is that watching him in this classic movie, not only was it sort of amazing to see your dad on screen, but the idea of being introduced to see horror as as a piece of art, not just something that's sort of a subgenre, some sub art, but something like really special. So I think immediately, since we're talking a lot about genre here in horror, I think it immediately contextualized for me that horror was to be taken serious, and that it wasn't something to be dismissed.
Right. So The Exorcist always worked for you, regardless of the fact that it was your father in it. Because I spoke to Oz Perkins at one point, and he acknowledges watching Psycho. He's like, I think my dad's work in that film is one of the finest performances ever. So I'm always curious, because for us, The Exorcist scared the shit out of me. It was always an effective piece. So I'm always curious if it takes someone like you out of it because you recognize the person in there, or if you can get swept up in the actual film.
Well, it always worked for me because as a young kid, seeing your father be thrown out of a window down the steps by the devil was always was always really upsetting. Even though I knew that it was just a movie, it still was deeply disturbing to watch your father die. Mm-hmm. Constantly, and I think that in certain ways it introduced the idea of death really early on to me as a youngster. I think probably prematurely, but it was through the movies to really sort of examine that your own mortality. And I think that sort of was a scary way to think about your mortality the first time, but also almost in some weird way, a kind of gradient to understand sort of your existence a little bit. I know I'm getting a little off topic and I'm getting a little philosophical about it, but I think that's the great thing about horror is that you can smuggle in philosophical ideas. Right. You could smuggle in interesting ideas that if you did them straight on in a normal narrative movie, they would just seem obvious and cliche. But what's fun about horror is it's like a crossword puzzle in a way, and you're just trying to connect all the words and design of what is behind that puzzle. And that becomes sort of, I think, the intellectual and academic pleasure of horror.
Yeah, It's working as a writer or a director, or even as an actor. It's like you're working out your own questions. You're working out your own curiosity. You're working out. It's like some people sit on their computer up until 2 a.m. looking at creepy images online. Other people just pour it out on a page or pour it out on a screen.
Right. For the audience watching, it's cathartic as well because it's
absolutely
all of our ways of dealing with mortality.
Absolutely. But I feel like there's a kind of a disconnect too. Because I turn to horror because of the fantastical elements, as opposed to the catharsis, so to speak. You know, I'll turn, if I hear about a grisly story, I'm like, oh, you know, I bet that was awful. Let me watch this video, you know, and that kind of grounds me. But then I need to turn to the stuff that we're making or the stuff that I really love to kind of get my head out of that place, that darkness. Mark, what about for you? I mean, what's your background?
I hail from Montreal, Canada. We didn't have Z Channel, but we had something that was out of Toronto called City TV. Which, you know, was where I first saw, you know, in my parents' basement, you know, Cannibal Girls or Bob Clark's Black Christmas. And, you know, they were definitely like the indie station. And they had all kinds of really wacky kind of programming. And for me, you know, growing up, you know, I grew up as far away from sort of being involved in an industry family as you could possibly get. I mean, my dad was a VP of marketing for wire and cable. You know, my mom was a homemaker, and they were both adamantly opposed to any kind of R-rated entertainment, let alone anything involving violence. So, like, even movies like Grease and Dirty Dancing were like completely like verboten.
Wow.
So it was like growing up in Footloose a little bit.
Don't you love how, like, and yet you end up at the same table? Two people from totally different backgrounds.
Yeah, the heart wants what it wants, you know.
And here you are.
And you know, I grew up. I think I gravitated towards horror because, I mean, you know, it's like we're gonna get all Angela Chase and real personal here. But like, you know, I you know, growing up queer in the '90s was kind of a tense time. For a variety of reasons. And, you know, I grew up a very anxious person, and horror movies became a way for me to really purge that anxiety in a way that was safe and not involving risky behavior. Or I think that horror movies, when they're done right, are a public service, frankly, I think, to a certain segment of the population. I know maybe that sounds kind of, you know, nutty to some people, but I don't care.
I think our listeners will get it.
And, you know, I wasn't cool, you know. I was very much like, you know, sort of a homework and TV and, you know, straight to school, straight home. Very few, if any, friends kind of person. I was a Larry Strode. And yeah, and you know, I didn't have like sort of punk queer figures to like gravitate. I mean, they existed. You know, there's like, you know, any artists like you know, Wojnarowicz or sorry, I'm drawing a blank because
You're wearing a David Bowie shirt.
I am wearing a David Bowie shirt.
There you go.
I also just being recorded terrifies me, I think. So that's why
You're fine.
I'm
You're
drawing a
amongst
blank.
friends. It's all good.
Yeah.
It's fine. Everything's fine.
What were some of the films that had the most impact on you? That what like spoke to you in the horror genre that you were like, oh, now this is art.
I think the first, they were always 70s.
Mm-hmm.
They were always 70s. So I mean, I think the holy trinity of the 70s, like Texas Chainsaw, Carrie, and Halloween. Yeah. Carrie especially because it's so emotional. Mm-hmm. And I think that because it is entirely about, the horror is entirely born out of the heroine. Which, you know, I think, you know, for me at least at the time, I could really sort of identify with, like the monster inside you kind of thing, you know, gonna blow up the school and kill your mom and get, like, just like basically ruin your life, you know, like that kind of thing. So so those were definitely I think the holy trinity for me. Do
you remember seeing, I'm only curious because it's Montreal, do you remember seeing Rabid when it came out? Just because it's in that city.
Yeah, I remember seeing. I remember getting a clamshell. You know, like the Warner Brothers green
plastic,
and black clamshell with like Marilyn Chambers looking like, rah, you know, like kind of on the cover, and being really scared of it. And like, but Cronenberg especially was also not just because he's a native son, but also just because, you know, I mean, so many of his movies just involve identity in the body and terror of, you know, the body. And you know, I like I was saying, like I wasn't cool. I didn't have. I was terrified to like reach out to people, so I didn't have like cool friends to like go places with and whatever. But I did have a video store that was run by the most kind of laissez-faire stoner guy ever. So
This is
you know, my
repeating narrative
Yeah.
in our
like
world.
my mom would be like, you know, oh, I think that, you know, Pretty Woman is finally made it to. Can you go get? Sure, you know, and I would go get, but I wasn't allowed to watch it. FYI.
Yeah, I was going to say.
Not allowed to watch it.
That's the
So,
second
like-
time Pretty Woman has come up this episode.
Yeah.
Just saying. Just saying.
It is a horror movie technically, but that's a whole other. Technically, it's like, oh my god, it's really it's so fucked up. But God rest Gary Marshall. I'm sorry, I don't mean to offend anyone. But no, to wrap it up, it's like, you know, I would like rent that, and then, you know, and I would also be like, oh, blood-sucking freaks. Why don't we, you know, check that out?
That's
you know?
a double bill right
Yeah.
Yeah,
I
was a
love
heady
that you
one.
mentioned Cannibal Girls, because that's the Eugene Levy film, right?
yeah.
Like
Eugene
that-
Levy, Andrew Martin. I think it was Ivan Reitman's first film.
Yeah, Ivan Reitman's first film. It's one that like not a lot of horror fans in the States know about, but my Canadian friends are immediately like, have you seen Cannibal? It's like their blood diner.
Oh yeah, no, it's
So,
a
yeah.
completely. It's
a lot of fun. If you guys have not seen it, check out Cannibal Girls.
Did
It's a
your
trip.
folks ever catch you with renting something like that, like in the long run?
No, I was pretty slick about it.
I think that's when horror's at its best, when it's secret. Like it's that thing you're secretly doing.
It's interesting that you say that. Like because going back to your question about the early sort of experiences with horror, I felt like I had this like really odd additionally to watching obviously The Exorcist as a youngster. I used to go to the Fairfax cinemas with my grandmother, who was basically sort of legally blind at the time, so she couldn't drive. So we took the bus from Hancock Park all the way to the Fairfax cinemas, which was like an added bonus to going to a movie, because I would always convince my grandmother that we were going to see some movie, but I didn't really tell her what it was about. And I was maybe like honestly 8 years old at the time, and it was usually a Friday the 13th movie. And it was like 2, 3. But the added bonus of seeing it at the Fairfax cinemas is that you didn't know if you were going to get killed going to the movie, because the movie theater was really dilapidated. There was like water and leaks coming in, but I thought it like added to the cool like Times Square
That's
of
one
it
that's
all.
closed now in the corner.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I remember that.
And it would just be this like weird communal experience that my grandmother loved to take me to. I loved horror movies. I was clearly too young to be watching Friday the 13th part. I guess 3 maybe was the first one I saw with her. But yet she stayed and she kind of enjoyed it, and she like supported my love of this. And I think the kind of communal experience of watching horror movies with my grandmother is sort of like the DNA of why I love horror. And then Mark and I met, we started to date, and then we also had like that shared love of it, because I mean, it's fun to watch a horror movie alone. I watched a horror movie the other day alone, but I have to like turn on the lights. I watch my dog, who's already neurotic enough, kind of like looking at things. I'm like, what did he hear? And then I'm convinced like the world becomes the movie in a way. Like I just fall so deeply into it that I don't like watching them alone, to be honest. And I enjoy that pleasure of being. Misery loves company, so does fear, I guess, in a certain way. And there's a joy in that, and it's just interesting to think about. I hadn't thought about, but hanging out with my grandmother is also where my passion for horror started.
Wow, it's pretty amazing.
It's weird that those like grungy theaters hold such like a power, because like did you guys go to the Pioneer 2 Boots in New York?
God, yeah.
It was this old, just tiny theater. I think it maybe had 50 seats, if that. And like you would order a soda and they would open the fridge and you'd get a can of soda, and like the employee's lunch is sitting
Right
next
next
to
to it,
it.
yeah.
And it was just this tiny little theater. Like you could just picture porn playing on the screen. And I'm sure it had many, many times.
But Bill Lustig was always sitting in the back seat every time I went to the
Yeah.
because he lived right at the Bronx. So
Really?
And-
he was walking like Maniac Cop director.
I loved going to that theater
Yeah.
so much. Like I would see crap there just because it was playing at that theater. And I was sad when they closed it.
There was the Pan Pacific Theater on Hollywood Boulevard, which was sort of like a chamber of horrors. They had 3 levels, and it was sort of, how badly do you want to be murdered?
Which level?
You know,
Each
which
level
level?
is progressively
pick,
worse.
Pick your death. And I mean, I don't know, but these great sort of elephants that just sat there but played these movies, and I just went to them constantly, and it was just, you talked about like, it's sort of a secret. You felt like you were in sort of this secret underground society, appreciating things that maybe everyone else didn't get. And that was sort of the pleasure. Like it became your own experience. And that's the great thing about horror, I think, in a lot of ways.
Yeah. Can I ask you? Obviously you were an actor fairly young, and River's Edge is one of my favorite movies, and you did a lot of interesting movies that had a lot of adult themes for a young person to be in. But you were seeing horror at age 6 through 8. So, was it? How did you get into the whole acting thing? Was that always kind of a conscious decision? Because of your family, or was it something you really wanted to do? And at the same time, how did you kind of handle the adult themes of some of the movies that you were doing?
Okay, how did I handle the adult themes? Well, I grew up in Hollywood, so a lot of adult situations were happening around me. And I grew up around a lot of people, obviously, in the business, so a lot of adult problems were happening around me. So at a very young age, I think I kind of grew up fast. So the idea of making movies that dealt with adult themes didn't seem all that foreign to me. It just sort of felt like something that felt natural and that I could intellectually understand to some degree. I think the idea in starting out, nobody forced me to do it. I didn't have like a stage mom, like, we got to get the electricity on. It wasn't that kind of thing. It was definitely more, I think, about like approaching it as an art form. And I know that sounds a bit idealistic, but I think that's, coming from a family of artists, that was just sort of a natural way to approach it. And I think the idea was always to try to do work that had some meaning to it and felt special. And I think movies like River's Edge, which felt like a really important social commentary, in the time that they were making that movie, if you think about it, I don't remember the exact year, but, that movie was looked upon. No one wanted to be in that movie. No one wanted to touch that movie. And when the movie first came out, despite all the praise, there were tons of people that were saying, how can you make a movie about a group of friends who don't call the police because their friend killed someone? What a horrible, sensationalistic film about youth culture. What are you encouraging? It just became kind of this, obviously, eventually, hypocrisy, obviously, but it blew the sort of, it peeled back the curtain on what was really going on in a lot of ways in America at that time. And of course, eventually what we saw that eventually happened in, sort of the unrest of whatever youth culture at the time. And I think that it was a privilege to be part of those things because I think they were always learning experiences, because I always looked at roles as, this will maybe teach me something more about the world or about people or about what's going on. And then you meet people like, I think one of the best experiences I ever had was with Kathryn Bigelow, where making Near Dark, she was somebody who, well, first of all, was not approaching it as a horror movie. And it's interesting because we were talking about Halloween earlier, and I think John Carpenter was saying about Halloween is like he never intended to make a slasher movie. This was a movie that genre was not hadn't been labeled yet.
Yeah, because there was only Black Christmas and Texas Chainsaw in '74. The slasher cycle hadn't started yet. I mean, Halloween ostensibly started the slasher cycle, so it was more of like this mythical battle between good and evil. And is that how Kathryn kind of like? Well, no, not like that. She wouldn't phrase it like that, probably. But like, how did she?
Well, I think Kathryn wanted to make a movie about family,
Yeah.
and family ties, and she very much, look, the whole cast had just finished doing Aliens together, right?
Right.
And so, by the way, a movie I saw at the Pan Pacific Theater, which was like amazing. So when I knew I was going to work with these people, I was like, this is the coolest job ever. And she had us all go to the Border Grill, if anyone remembers that restaurant in LA. I was all of like, I don't know, for 13, 14, and hanging out with these really cool adults. And again, adult themes and adult situations. But my mom trusted Kathryn because Kathryn became kind of like this really sexy nanny. And I had a major crush on her because who wouldn't? I mean, she's Kathryn Bigelow. And she's brilliant and really intimidating. And she said, I want to build a family unit with all of you. So we're all going to be spending a lot of time together just socially. And so we just went shopping together, went to dinners together, constantly spending time. So I think the benefit of that experience was, getting to like learn how movies are made and watching a great master like that learn how she created a dynamic, an interpersonal dynamic between actors so that it really read on screen. And I think when you watch that movie, you feel like these people have been with each other for 1,000 years.
Yeah.
So anyway, long answer to your question, but
No, I appreciate it. And
I was going to say, Near Dark to me was always the movie about the boy who had to meet the family for the first time. The boyfriend.
Yeah, exactly.
That's what it was. The first time I saw that, I was like, oh my God, that's like, it's literally boy falls in love with a girl says, "Hey, meet my fam," and they're going to accept you, or they're not.
And it's one of the first. I feel like that was the kind of revealing the broken families of America. So one of the first dysfunctional family, like, oh, this is a new family, not the old values of what a family used to be, but post-divorce families where it's all patched together. So in this
half
case,
brothers, half sisters, stepchildren, right?
And it really in that period, like Blue Velvet's another one. But there's these movies in the '80s, like in that Reagan time period, that it's pretty interesting. It's one of those films that, especially once you guys go into the bar and you see these dynamics of all these very different people. But it makes sense that that's why the performances work, because you all knew each other so well, because they're all so different that it could totally fall apart, but it doesn't. It's like one of the great scenes, I think, in a movie.
And it just dawned on me that again, we snuck some of these movies that we weren't supposed to see. We were a little too young to see them. But your work as an actor, you were the same age as I was. So when I'm watching River's Edge, a very adult movie I shouldn't be watching, or Near Dark, I guess I'm kind of seeing it through your character's eyes, because like, well, that kid's my age. So I feel like I'm doing adult stuff with adult people because, that's the setup.
Well, to answer the other part of your question, like what was it like being in such sophisticated situations as a young person? I think in certain ways, I think some people would say, well, your mom let you shoot guns at 12 years old and kill people, whether you were a vampire or a delinquent or whatever. And I think in certain ways, I don't know, it allowed me to be a little more aware of the world and learn things. But at the same token, I have to say I had a very problematic, very troubling family life at the time for various reasons. And I felt the idea of being able to be an actor and express themselves in a creative way saved my life. I don't think I would be alive if I didn't have that creative outlet, honestly. I think it gave me something to live for. And I think some young actors, it's the same reason they do it, but they don't necessarily make it out alive. But for me, I not barely, more than barely made it out. And I think that part of that, though, is because I had a strong foundation around me.
Right.
Whereas other people I don't think had. And, River's Edge, I think it was okay to say. I mean, originally that was Corey Haim, and they were shooting it. And Corey Haim was really having trouble on set. And I grew up, really looking up to Corey Haim. He was in some of my favorite movies as a kid. And I had gone out on River's Edge 10 times. And then I heard they were shooting it, and I didn't get the role. And then, unfortunately, they had to replace him. And then my opportunity came about. But he's an example of somebody who did some really special work, really extraordinary work. In horror and all kinds of genre stuff. Right. And, I don't know, sometimes you fight monsters, you lose, or you become the monster, or you survive. And I think, unfortunately, he lost the battle. Yeah. But such a talent.
Wow.
No, and for you, Mark, I mean, in terms of getting out of Montreal and getting into film, what did film mean to you? What was the kind of pivotal moment that made it click for you that you wanted to work in film and write your own stories?
Writing, for the longest time I thought that I was just going to act, and so that's what I studied predominantly. And then when I was in grad school, I was really kind of discovering that maybe that I had limited range, and so I started writing. I was encouraged by a great theater director named Anne Bogart, who has a company called City Company. She's based in New York with this company.
She wrote books as well.
She wrote an amazing book called The Director Prepares.
Yeah,
okay,
I've read
I was
that.
going to say.
It's, I mean, Anne Bogart, A Director Prepares. I cannot recommend this book enough. It is really spectacular. She's so brilliant, and I had the very good fortune of doing a play with her in her company, a Marivaux play, and which she updated to this kind of I Love Lucy slapstick kind of comedy. She's just brilliant. She pulls from so many. And if I look back on it, actually, I think so much of whatever voice I bring to sort of the duo that we comprise, is definitely influenced by how she plays with her actors. And so I started writing a vaudeville about Leopold and Loeb. And, I wanted to tell that crazy-ass story, but within sort of the theatrical kind of convention that was popular at the time of their crime and conviction. And I started a relationship with someone at the Sundance Institute that was really encouraging and sort of kept me kind of going. writing, and then after grad school, I kept writing, and I met Josh. And I mean, if I have to credit anyone with sort of making me believe that it's actually possible to do anything, I'd have to say it's Josh. Because I think that what? He's getting all red.
Josh making faces. Just
making a face. No, but it's true. I think my family now are certainly like very encouraging, and they're very supportive. But I think when you come from Chicoutimi, Quebec, I think it can be very sort of difficult to wrap your brain around the idea of like like if your child says they're gonna go to New York or Hollywood to like go try to work in the industry, you automatically assume that they're gonna die with like a needle in their arm or something.
It's Beverly Hillbillies. You're like, wait, you're Beverly Hillbillies.
But even I think that no, the only thing I even now I sometimes go like I can't believe we're doing that. You know what I mean? But Josh grew up in it, and he knows what's possible.
Yeah, but even though I grew up, I still get excited walking on a studio a lot. Mark's like over it, I think, by now. But like I'm really excited when we go to like Fox or Funny. I'm like, wow.
Well, at certain lots I get excited. The Warner lot I get really excited.
You love the Warner lot.
I'm always like,
because Warner Brothers has been good to you.
Wait
till they like are not nice to us, and then we'll see how we feel.
When we're an old toy, but toss aside.
The Warner lot's just exciting anyway because they have that water tower, and as soon as you walk on, it's just iconic. And plus, it reminds me of Animaniacs. So
Animaniacs. That's right. It's all on Netflix, FYI.
Yeah, I know.
So good.
Wonderful.
But I mean, I think that. Oh, sorry.
No, you go ahead.
Oh no, I'm just a. I mean, I think that like I said, Josh definitely unlocked the real life possibility of it. Mm-hmm. But in terms of gravitating towards it, I think that horror movies they validated my point of view.
Now, did you both write on your own or with other partners before pairing up? I'm always curious about the writing process. I remember a couple years ago, Wizard of Gore, Jeremy Kasdan, and I interviewed him about it, and he talked about his discussions with you and saying that you were a very talented writer in your own right. Yeah. So even a couple years back, he was talking about you in that context. So did you start writing? Were you writing narrative stuff or, like novels? Or what kind of writing did you get into first?
I'll get to that question, but I do want to mention something that when Mark and I first met, what really inspired me about him as a human being and as a writer, he had wrote this one-man show about Monty Cliff and Elizabeth Taylor's relationship. Now, emphasis on one-man show. Emphasis.
I feel like cut to me exploding in a cloud of rainbow glitter. Like there's literally.
What's gay about playing Monty Cliff and Elizabeth Taylor at the same time?
Just so you know, I've got a Place in the Sun original poster in my office. It's my favorite movie, so you're speaking my language. I want to see your one-man show. I'm in.
Isn't A Place in the Sun? George Stevens, man.
I think it's the best movie
It
ever
is so
made.
exquisite, that movie. It's beautiful.
It's in my top list as well. And also, by the way, my dearly departed, one of my best friends in the world, Karen Black. If you're going to drop a name, you got to drop that name.
Man, was she
But
awesome.
she's one of the wherever she is, I think about her all the time, and we lost her a couple of years ago. But she was in New York doing a movie, and so I said, well, we need an audience to watch you read the play, so let's invite Karen Black over.
One-man show
why
for
don't
Karen
you
Black.
Do your one-man show as Elizabeth Taylor and Monty Cliff?
Wow.
He did it. Mark did it.
Making it gayer. Wow. we just
wow.
I mean, but yeah, Karen, man.
And she loved it.
She was.
That was great.
Karen was truly.
Do you remember exactly what her first words were after it was over?
I feel you actually. I remember when I finished reading it, because it was more of like a seated reading more than anything. I feel like she sort of sat back, and then with that that look, those eyes, she kind of like that cat kind of like whatever. She looked at me and she was like, wow. I was like, okay. Like she had this kind of thing, and I was like, oh my God, you were in Nashville.
Are there any Karen Blacks today? I mean, people that are in another movie in the movie they're in, but you want to be part of that other movie they're bringing to the movie they're in?
I think Gabby Hoffman in some of her film work approaches a kind of
that's a good comparison.
a quality of Karen.
Yeah, that's a great.
I feel like Juno Temple, if she wanted to, she could get to like a Karen Blackie kind of quality. But there's not, you know, it was like a very specific kind of beauty. Like I remember, like
it was a beauty with talent.
I just went to see
her nuances. You know, it was just. Yeah.
Well, there aren't a lot of idiosyncratic actors in that way anymore. Like that, I think for me a male equivalent is like a Harry Dean Stanton. There's not a lot of like Gene Hackman retires, and you're like, who would fill those shoes? Look at the way he looks. Look at his presence. He's a big guy. But and then I look at actors. They all look a certain way. That all the female actresses that they would push onto the casting. I imagine even a movie like Final Girls, right, are of a certain type because they want them all. They're from the WB or whatever, and it's a certain thing.
Homogenized. You know? You're right. They're not, and the roles are not written, and they're not cast that way.
I have to interject with Harry Dean Stanton. So I was at a thrift shop in Virginia last week, and my husband found a Harry Dean Stanton fan club T-shirt, which he purchased for $3 and will now be wearing it everywhere.
He could sell it for $300.
We have no idea what it was, why it was made, or where it came from, but it is a Harry Dean Stanton fan club shirt based out of Kentucky because it's got like the places on the back. So yeah, well, there was a fan club at some point.
Well, Harry Dean Stanton's getting some big award at the Ace Theater in a couple of weeks. Did you guys read about that?
Oh, maybe it's the David Lynch thing. Is it?
No, it's something else. And it's like, and the lineup is like Chris Christopherson. I mean, people like that and Harry Dean Stanton.
The Monty Hellman fan club.
Basically.
It's all the people who worked with us.
Is that guy still alive?
Yeah, Monty Hellman,
yeah.
Yeah.
I was just watching Burnt Offerings.
Oh,
here.
Yes.
Oh my gosh.
Break in the morning, and
I haven't seen that Blu-ray yet. Is it good?
It's beautiful. It's beautiful.
Such a
but
crazy
watching
movie,
it, you have Karen Black and Oliver Reed.
Yeah.
You know,
Who
and
both kind of exist in separate universes, but still in the same movie.
Exactly. Yeah. And even as they're going through their kind of metamorphosis, the film pushes them through. They roll through it so well. You know. I love that movie.
Well, you know who else?
It's such a weird movie.
You know who else is kind of like a Karen Black type iconic character who's above the movie? Is someone actually who Karen helped nurture is Juliette Lewis.
Oh yeah.
She's sort of transmitting from another,
and she could get even more interesting the older she gets. Like I could imagine her at 55, 60 being really interesting.
Absolutely.
They give her interesting roles at least. They don't give her like
Patricia Arquette was on that kind of trajectory.
Kind of, right? Yeah.
She had that.
You know, like True Romance. You're like she's
channeling from some other.
Yeah, she's channeling something different.
And it's danger too. There's a danger.
Yeah.
You know, it seems like young actresses. They don't have to have that danger anymore. They have to be so likable.
Right. Is Paz de la Huerte too far?
Too far.
That's way too far. She's in another galaxy.
I like her, though.
She's on the other side of the street barking like a dog walking down the street. I've seen these things live.
I still have a theory.
I love her, but
100 years we will be teaching college courses on the acting stylings of Paz de la Huerte.
I mean,
it's gonna happen.
I just, when I think back on Boardwalk Empire, I mean, I just, like, I remember she would like stop the show like every scene, and I would just be like, what?
I think it opened with her riding him cowboy style, right? But Shammy, I think I think that's the first time you see her. She's just going
and she's
for
like,
it.
I won't get
Daddy. Like, she's like, it was just like, so.
She's like the nanny from the show, but on that other level. It's like
you guys have seen Nurse 3D?
No.
Oh my God.
Her starring role.
No, I know about
It's
it. I haven't
insane.
seen it yet.
Holy crap.
Is it worth, so we should see it.
You need to see it just for
3D
her.
if possible.
I always say, like, she's allergic to pants in the movie. Like, it's just, she doesn't even bother.
In general, I think.
well, Enter the Void. Come on.
She's like a 1-year-old, you know? 1-year-olds they like just drop a kid on a beach and the kid's just running around naked. That's Paz de la
It's, it's like
I love her in
underwear and
Enter
a
the
t-shirt.
Void.
You don't
She's
bother.
really
Oh,
great.
yeah.
She's really
And I
great.
have
She's
to,
got talent.
I don't want to get like TMZ on this, but the amount of stories I hear about her, it's amazing. It's just amazing. But
I would much prefer somebody who comes with that kind of baggage. And think about working with Oliver Reed or Klaus Kinski, any of these guys. You know, you're going to have to deal with all this baggage, and yet what you're going to get should be completely worth it because this is a medium that all that matters is what's in the frame. Who gives a fuck? All the stories that take place around a movie because no one's going to care. It's a couple people watch an extra feature. Besides that, the people are seeing the movie, right? Yeah. And so I just always am floored by Oliver. You know, someone, especially Oliver Reed, like that you could be drinking that much and then still get on set and deliver some of the performances he did. I can't believe it. Kinski's a different level of, you know.
But the Devils,
challenge.
I mean, Oliver Reed and the Devils floors me every time.
Oh my God, that movie.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
That movie broke my head open when I saw it.
I watched it. I'd seen it so many times, but I watched it last year on screen. I think at Beyond Fest.
Yep.
And it was like watching a whole different movie. It was amazing on the big screen. It's so gorgeous. The white tile that he put everywhere because like the whole interior is nothing but this white tile. It's amazingly grown.
I don't know if I
Vanessa
liked it, but I
Redgrave
experienced
Yeah, I begged Rob to come along. So.
But Vanessa Redgrave as a sexually repressed hunchback man.
Played by Vanessa
Pretty good.
I
Redgrave.
mean,
She
A
can do-
hot
she can do
hunchback,
anything.
sexually
I mean,
repressed nun.
just-
That Vanessa
pretty good.
Redgrave.
it's like I was like, oh, this movie had me at hello. Like, just like, come on.
But going back to your question about process, I think because you asked how did we start working together,
yeah,
or how
pretty much.
how did I get into writing?
Well, I
and
mean,
how we got-
because I mean, we're you know, the dynamic that you have now. Obviously, you both write everything together, but what did it take to get there? Did you write for a while on your own?
Okay,
Did
gotcha.
you write with other partners and vice versa? And how did that change once you guys met each other and realized that, oh, okay, we're a writing partnership and this is how we work?
Well, we talked about his writing experience starting in theater, playing Elizabeth Taylor in My Club. I was
Yeah, I'm so happy. I'm so happy you brought that up. Thank you. I feel really good. I feel really good about that.
never forget. I think for me, well, a couple things. I started writing as a. It sounds very pretentious, but as a novelist. You know, I was studying fiction and. I loved writing books. You know,
That's
that's
Mark
what,
laughing, by the way.
I didn't.
The guy who did the one-man play of Elizabeth Taylor.
Okay, you know
The
what?
nerve, the nerve.
I was having a great time. Sorry, go on.
So yes, I was trying to write serious fiction and also working on a play. So I think but even writing fiction, I was always inspired by movies and photography and making movies. Like the first book I wrote, it was very loosely semi-autobiographical, but not really. And there's a lot of actually the making of Near Dark in it. And it's about this sort of teen kid who's strung out on heroin in Hollywood, comes from a Hollywood family. And God, maybe it's not autobiographical. Or maybe it is. And he's making this horror movie. And it's a lot about, like, so writing about movies was really cool. And then so there was like a meta aspect to the book itself. And I think, you know, not jumping ahead too much into Final Girls, but like the idea of deconstructing horror in some way or adding like meta elements always sort of was of interest. But I think ultimately, you know, writing fiction felt kind of was not satisfying me enough as a creative person, and I was working on some plays. But I think books are something that you have to be compelled to do because they demand all of you, like on a molecular level, and you have to disappear from the world forever. Which is why, like, I haven't written a book since my first one, although now I am. And I think the good news is that in between this new book, I met Mark. And what was interesting about that experience thus far is that we both shared so many similar passions. And we came out to Los Angeles to actually work on a movie called Teen Witch as writers. And
Sounds familiar.
yeah, it was a movie
You have,
that was
you have
also
your number one
in.
fan. to the
I'm
left of me.
restraining geeking out on the Teen
Yeah.
Witch thing.
We told her to
I'll
contain
wait.
herself.
I had to
All right.
contain
Yeah.
myself, guys.
We have to call in some backup. No, I can talk all about Teen Witch forever. There's a lot of great things about it. But just to quickly answer your question, which I haven't done yet, is we met and then we came out here to work on Teen Witch as a movie, and my mom like convinced Mark like, oh, you know, you should stay here if you really want to pursue movies. And my mom looked at me and she was like, don't you want to support your partner? He really wants to be in Hollywood. I'm like, oh, Hollywood. I hate Hollywood. I've written my way out of here. I don't want to come back. Well, we stayed. We started like sort of basically collaborating on pilots, which seemed like a nice synthesis between like our love of literature and film. It just seemed like TV seemed to be the most interesting place for writers, obviously.
Right.
And so we just started working together. And I think I in terms of process, I would say that it's weird. We perform our work, I think, in a lot of ways.
Our living room gets lit.
It's literally like a stage. I think because we both have acting backgrounds, and obviously, you know, Mark is genius at dialogue, and he's just so much, and he has an improv background, and I have the acting background, so it just became like a way of almost like talking our way through the movies, and then we'd go off and write it. But a lot of it was created as performance, and then we'd sort of contextualize scenes in our love of film as directors. Like if we read our scripts, they're actually written as if the director wrote them. And some people complain about that. We're like, no, we want you actually to see how we want the movie to be made because that's something we want to eventually do anyway to direct. But it was also like that's just how we have to be the author of this. And I think that, so in terms of process, I would say we perform it a lot. We do lots of readings of our work to hear it out loud. We yell and scream and fight and throw things a lot. We is that accurate?
Bruises are below my neck.
I don't know what else is our process. I'm getting lost. All of a sudden.
Process. I mean, but beyond that, I mean, I don't know. I mean, he's jokingly making it sound more dramatic than it is, I think. I mean, you know, have there been sort of like, I think, throwdown fights, like passionate fights about like someone fighting for something or against something? I mean, sure, that happens occasionally, but I mean, the longer we work together, I mean, the more I feel like we're kind of like we same brain it a little bit. Like it's kind of like I'll say something that he already thought of, and vice versa, and it just you know. I mean, am I crazy? But I feel like that's more common than not.
I mean, I think in a lot of ways, because we are a couple in real life, I suppose not in real life. I think I'm just getting over a cold, so maybe I sound a little loopy, but I think we do like inhabit the work we do on like a physiological level. And I think we care so deeply about what we do, which sometimes like terrifies people because like, whoa, they're never going to take a note. But the truth is we're very collaborative. But we, you know, there's a real sort of, I guess, symbiosis that goes on. And I think that really makes the work feel like it's kind of birthed from like, and it's a living organism as opposed to like a job for hire. Anytime we've ever taken a job for hire, which has been very, very little, it always sucks.
Well, no, that's not true.
Well,
Queen of the South was something.
But we threw away the book pretty much and created it on our own, don't you think?
I mean,
a lot of it?
The voice, the storytelling voice, yes. The story itself, no.
Okay.
I mean,
What's that one? Queen of the South?
Queen of the South.
It's the TV show, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
And that was a really positive experience, but it was also because, you know, we decided to write it from the point of view of a minority figure that was full of rage against her white audience. And that's how we wrote it, and that's what brought a level of sort of like really a streak of black humor to what could ordinarily be an oppressively violent and unpleasant show. And so that was actually kind of like us bringing that to the table was like sort of, part and parcel to. But again, it goes back to, just like doing anything for hire, it doesn't matter. I think the things we connect to on such a deep level that,
Let me clarify, sorry. Things that we took for hire that we didn't love.
Yeah.
Or didn't feel like was ours. Like, obviously, when we read Queen of the South, the book, we're like, we're in love with this. That we knew how to do. So I think, I know you guys were talking about another director that was in here who actually was going to be directing the pilot of Queen of the South at one point. He, this idea that the authorship is so critical. Why do anything if you can't bring your voice to it? Mm-hmm. And I think that ultimately, we've come to the same sort of conclusion. The process for us now about anything is if it doesn't feel like it comes from us, from our like a piece of our soul, then then it's not of any value to us or worth our time, right? It took a long time in our process to ever sort of.
It seems like the most obvious thing in the world, but I think that when you're working and people bring you things at first, I think when you're first working, you can be like, oh my God, somebody brought me something, you know what I mean? Like, and you're just like, I need to do this because God forbid it goes away, And then I think, I can't speak for Josh, but I'm definitely a person who I don't learn from other people's mistakes. I only learn from my own. If you don't feel that childlike excitement and that kind of like gut, I can't stop thinking about it. When it's if you don't get to the place where it stops being work and it becomes play, then probably you shouldn't do it.
Well, it's interesting. We were brought, and I will not mention the name of the director, but one of the biggest directors in the entire business right now, and has been for at least the last 7 years. He wanted us to write a gay wedding movie, and on the surface, it was like, holy moly, this is happening. We're going to get to write.
And he was like,
yeah,
you guys.
He actually wanted to direct Final Girls, but I guess his agents talked him out of it, et cetera, whatever.
Can't imagine why.
but he's a wonderful guy, but, he had to adhere to the studio's needs for this gay wedding movie. Oh, and we turned in our first draft.
Which was like a gay Annie Hall.
And they said, does it have to be so gay?
No, I mean, like the DNA of it, right?
This is what the studio said.
Because we pitched them, we're going to write you the gay Annie Hall, you know? And they were like, great, great, great. And it was like, you know, because marriage had just become legal, and gay marriage, and we had gotten to it. So we told them, you know, okay, it's going to be about how we as gay men in a relationship have just been handed the keys to a fucking Porsche, and we don't know how to drive. We literally don't know how to drive. And it's like, okay, here we go. We're going on a road trip in our brand new Port, you know, and it's like about, so it was going to be about the should we, shouldn't we, I don't know, maybe.
Do we even want the keys?
Do we even want the keys? Maybe I don't want a Porsche. I like my Prius, maybe. You know what I mean? It was like, so it was going to be about that. And they were like, great, great, great. And then you hand it in, and then it's like, God, there's a lot of gay people in this movie. Well, yes. Yes, it is. They have sex in it. Yes, they do. Gay people actually do have sex. I know it's crazy.
There were scenes where like two of the main lead actors were complaining about who was not, you know, satisfying the other one in a certain way, and
it was like, you give more blowjobs than I do, or like vice versa. I was like, I'm always giving blowjobs. You never give me blowjobs. This has got to change. It was like, they were like, we don't like that they fight about blowjobs, you know. And it was like, well, okay. And so it was just like, can it just be a movie about, you know, they're just really cute and in love, and it's not sexual.
And their families are trying to tear them apart.
Because their families just really want this big wedding, and they don't want that. And their families are driving them crazy, you know? And we were just like, no. That's stupid.
No, and yes, we had a contract, so we like gave them a draft, which was basically like a page one rewrite.
And it was uninspired.
So to answer your question about what process was, heartbreak. Utter heartbreak. But those kind of, for me at least, those heartbreak experiences actually are kind of like a breakthrough, because we realize we will never sort of compromise our integrity and our integrity of vision in the way we did at that point, because turning in that script felt like we're writing a movie about our culture and our relationship and our lives, and you are telling me about my world, and you're a bunch of like straight women, nothing against straight women, telling me about what it's like to be a gay man. It just felt really weird, and who am I? And I know this, I'm full of contradictions because we love to write about straight women. But the thing is that they wanted to so whitewash what would be queer about it, special, unique, idiosyncratic. They just wanted it to be basically a Nancy Meyers movie, but happened to be two
no
gay
disrespect
characters.
to Nancy Meyers. When Nancy Meyers hits, she hits. Okay.
No, I love those Academy screeners when you're at a hotel and
Private
watching a
Benjamin,
Nancy Meyers movie over the holidays.
Shit, Private Benjamin is...
You got to go to bed to something, you know? But it was just, you know, it was so heartbreaking that was like kind of a turning point for us in our process of approaching everything thereafter, because, you know, because it was so personal. What we wanted to do, because we felt like we were given an opportunity to tell the story of millions of people who have not been seen in such a major studio picture about what it means to be gay today in marriage. And so we felt a real civil duty, civil responsibility, and to just ignore that and just be sort of craven and after and greedy for money. And how do we make this appealable to everyone? And the flyovers just felt everything we stand against, you know? So for us, process became about, you know what, screw it. Let's go to the desert and do a couple of ideas and write everything on spec, and either go and teach after that if nothing sells, which is a wonderful thing to do too, and I want to still do that in my life. I've done it before. Or, you know, sell it and get to make stuff. And the good news is that we wrote our pilot, Queen of the South, which has become now, you know, a hit show. We wrote this other movie that Warner Brothers bought right away, and this other thing. We did this all on spec, pretty much. And then everything sort of like, you know, started to generate even more stuff in the last couple of years. And then Final Girls got made. So, you know, we took a gamble, you know, with our bank accounts, with our lives, to just literally write what we wanted to do. And I mean, I know that's kind of a Hollywood cliche, but I think people need to be reminded of that constantly, because there's so many stories that need to be told that are not being told, that are not out there, because they think, how do I put it? Like these are the machines that are withholding.
If you write to please anyone, you're dead.
Yeah, it's like you have to go so specific to hit the universal versus
basically,
if you try to go universal, you hit no one.
And all this whole need to like appeal to the most amount of people and softening the edges on everything, and then appeal to no one. It just anyway.
Let's talk a little bit about Final Girls, because the concept, at least when we all heard about the concept, it's like a strong idea in terms of like, wow, I can't believe I've never seen kind of that. The idea of somebody whose mom was a scream queen or a final girl, and then loses that person in their life. And then just the whole idea is really radical and kind of crazy. Is this something that you guys had been thinking about for a long time? Because obviously you're both big genre fans. How did this kind of come to be?
We had, we were at our house one night, and I think we'd had a particularly kind of, I think, exhausting week, or like a frustrating week with the project, and it was just like one of those. It was, I think, another one of those circumstances where we were passionate about something, and it was. I think we had written a pilot for a network. It was about a Marine who had served in Afghanistan, and when he returned, his PTSD was manifesting itself as lycanthropy. And so it was going to be like this sort of
PTSD werewolf.
Yes,
flick. It's a cool idea.
And and we were really passionate. We were really proud of the draft we wrote. And then it became, of course, can he be a happy werewolf? Can he just like his powers? Can he be like whatever? And it was just like, oh my God, can he solve crimes?
He's gonna tour the country like the Incredible Hulk.
Yeah, exactly. So it was just one of those things where it was like, why? And we kind of were like, what do we want to do? What would be fun? What would be like candy? What's gonna be play as opposed to work? And then we just fell upon the idea of what if kids fell into what would it be like to be stuck in an 80s horror movie, the movies, the trash movies that we sort of treasured. And of course, then the question became, okay, great. So you can do that, and you can have kids stuck in an 80s horror movie, but then the question becomes, well, why do you care? Who gives a shit? You know what I mean? It can be that goes as far as being, I guess, maybe a good spoof, but aside from that. And then it just, the more we talked about it, the more we dug, the more we sort of forced ourselves to challenge the idea and kind of figure out, well, what would be the connection? Obviously Josh's family history had a big, a lot to do with it. And that's when we fell upon the idea of what if, and, the family relationship between Max and, Nancy sort of slowly evolved.
Well, it's interesting going back to the question also again about process. I think I had been trying to write a book about my father's death, and sometimes, writing about something that literally happened, it just comes across as reportage. It doesn't have that magic or elan that fiction does. And I remember one of my professors saying, sometimes you have to write the lie to tell the truth. And I think that for a while I've been struggling to somehow talk about my father's loss, and then this became like the strangest, most interesting way to write a movie, a fever dream about grief. And that sort of is how Final Girls came about, really. And my mom was a final girl too. My brother was a final boy guy.
Final guy.
And I was never I always died. So I was never, literally I died in everything. So I
lived in Teen Witch.
Well, not in Family Ties.
Had to mention it at least once. Guys.
Yeah.
Come on.
Your bête noire, Teen Witch.
And so it just, that was the sort of the right, And we used to go out and like pitch that movie to people. And we would say, it's Terms of Endearment meets Friday the 13th. And they're like, would you like to see the door?
Yeah.
They thought we were like crazy.
Let us validate your parking. Thank you.
But it's the emotion that, like, I hadn't heard the pitch of this at all. I think the only other movie I can remember where teens were stuck in a movie would be, is it called Midnight Movie?
Midnight Movie.
And it's exactly what you're saying.
But it's like a real horror.
Yeah, but you don't give a shit about anyone.
Yeah.
And it's just hitting tropes with no emotion.
Yeah.
But the thing, when I saw the opening sequence, the emotion felt so kind of pure, and you really, also both the performances by the two female leads in this are really strong, and it gets you into the movie. Mm-hmm. So it almost wouldn't matter what the conceit is after that, because the emotional hook was already in place, and I think sounds like that came from a very real place for you guys, which I think it's great. It's no,
Well, no, but that's the borderland that's interesting in genre, where it becomes not just another movie to scare people, but as we were talking earlier, it has more on its mind, right? You could smuggle in ideas. Like I said, it was, for me, it was a way to write about losing my dad, or my fear of death, maybe, or all the above. And I think that, but yet if you could smuggle that into a slasher movie, even better.
Yeah, with that concept of her being able to relive, in a sense, a relationship with your parent, not when they actually go in the movie, but just by going to a movie and by being, and everyone else thinking it's a bigger deal than maybe she does. Like,
right.
Oh, but that person, she's like, yeah, but that's not really her. It's the movie. It plays with some pretty interesting ideas up front, I think.
We tried.
Did you guys watch a lot of slasher films before you started writing, or while you were writing?
Did we watch a lot of slasher movies? Oh man,
Who are you talking
like
to?
Kids in Candy Store. We were like so excited. We were having so much fun. But that like the emotional element was like really the thing when we were like, oh my god, that's the hook. That's why we need to write it. That's the reason to write it. But additionally, like playing in Carol Clover's sort of final girl kind of world and sort of trying to really make, like Carol Clover talks about, Her Body Himself is like one of my favorite pieces of writing like ever. And, but she's very strict about saying how the final girl, to call it a feminist construct, is laughable.
Yeah.
Because she's essentially just like a eunuch. She's a stand-in for the male audience member until she picks up the knife and, yay, she's got a dick. Now she can, you know what I mean? It's like, it's very like sort of Freudian light, whatever. And so it was like, but because we get to write about these women's relationships, and it feels like we can like actually let the final girl be something more than just, a stand-in for a male audience member. She can actually be like relating to, her like her feminine ideal, like the person who brought her into the world, and it can really mean something. And also just the fact that we were getting to tell a story about grief and about what it means to lose someone, or what it means to die in a world where death is at its cheapest. In slasher movies, it's like death is the main export. There's no. It's just like
That's
if someone walks into a horror movie or a slasher film, especially from that period, it's just they're meat.
You count the kills.
You count the kills. And you were like, that was a good kill.
Even the trailers, the trailers just for the kills. It was like,
It's
what?
just 1, 2, 3, exactly. Like that's
pretty...
and that's. They were like giving it away. They were just giving it away, and and that's. And because that was the reason to go to watch. It's like, let's go visit a slaughterhouse, and this became the game of the movie. It was like, how do we get people to care about the people that we're going to now pick off?
And how difficult is it as the writers to get across the tone that you're going for? Because the thing with this film is there's a lot of, it's primarily kind of a comedic tone because the idea is kind of funny, but then you're dealing with a death, a grief. And then, I remember when Elric saw it before me, I believe, and I liked it a lot, but I think your critique at the time of the movie itself was that, and I don't know the director personally or whatever, but I know he did one of the Harold and Kumar movies. I think you had said that you think the comedy works, but that you would wish that the scenes in the movie were more like a Friday the 13th movie.
It was almost, I think, my exact comment, and I'll be honest with you, because the emotion of the movie completely, I'll go as far as say it probably would have been my favorite film of the year had that been equaled with the scenes where there's actually a killer on screen. It felt, my exact quote was, it felt like it was directed by someone who had never seen any of the movies that the writers had written about. Like, that's how it felt. It felt like he was not a fan of that genre. Because it felt almost video game-ish at times, where he like the lightning comes and the thing, and I was like, oh, that's weird, because the other stuff is so on point every time the killer stuff happens. So that was my critique.
Right, and I'm not trying to put you on the spot.
No,
I agree with your critique.
Tonal things are important.
But I'm
right?
saying, when you're trying to write something, like how do you get the tone across? How do you get what are those discussions like in terms of what you feel should be the tone?
Well, it's interesting. I mean,
closer.
You're inspiring me about something you're saying as we're talking, which I can't. It's interesting. We wrote a hard R.
Oh, interesting.
And our intention was to balance, to have the drama and the tragedy be as equally, have as much gravity as the horror. And we were not the director. We actually were going to direct it originally, but we felt we were not prepared to do that. And when the movie was eventually first developed at New Line, I think there's some good things that came out of that experience. I think we built out the movie a little bit more, played with some of the tropes. But when it went to Sony, they had it in their minds to make a PG-13 movie. And at that point, Todd was attached, and he had a really, strong feeling about the movie in his soul, because he had just lost his father and felt this was a way for him to sort of have this cathartic experience as well that we all felt. And unfortunately, because of Sony's sort of need to reach the most amount of people, and this is what we talked about, softening the edges of things.
We reached the least amount of people.
Well, I mean, the thing is that, it's a shame, because I think in certain ways, Todd then was left to sort of work with what he had, which was, how do I make this work in a more broad way, and not, because if you can't really make it scary, well, then which direction do you go? And I think in certain ways it is not our original vision for the movie, but that is just sort of the nature sometimes, as we all know, of making movies. And it was heartbreaking, to say the least. But I'm also really glad that it found a devoted following of people who really see the ideas in it and still love it. And it means a lot to people. So, you don't necessarily, it's like a child you raise. I mean, you hope it'll turn out one way, but then it turns out really different. But you're happy it turned out some way.
It also reached a different audience that might not have gotten into an R, because I actually watched it with someone who doesn't watch horror films, and they watched it, they're hooked straight away when the accident happened, and they laughed and enjoyed the movie. And I was like, oh, that's surprising. You sat through that movie and really liked it.
But I would have rather
it feels like a gateway drug to horror movies now.
But I personally wish it had been an R, a hard R, which was what the script was, and I think
Kevin
that
Woods has a tonal thing that it felt like that if it had that kind of person at the helm of directing, or maybe if it wasn't being enforced to PG-13, it might not be him.
I don't think I blame Todd.
Right,
I think that Todd was had a gun to his head, and had to make a movie that the studio demanded. And when you have a studio telling you can't have any blood.
And it's been 5 years that we've been putting together the movie, and it falls apart, and it comes together again, and it falls apart. And, it's like you go, well, shit, we got to do, it's somebody's pulling the trigger. Let's fucking go, and with those obstructions, I agree with Josh. Todd absolutely did, did a great job.
And in terms of tone, I think in terms of balancing tone, I think what our sort of compass is that the funny should be really, really funny, and the sad scene should be really, really sad, and the scary should be really, really jarring. That was our sort of motto as we were writing the original version of it. And I think when you can do that, because I think tonally, what's interesting is that a lot of people were afraid of this movie because it was a horror comedy, and that's why we did have trouble making it originally. Because, they don't know how to market it, or they're worried that people will be confused about, what is it? Is it a comedy or is it a horror? Is it people? And the truth is, okay, maybe that is true. Maybe it is hard to market, but we all know that if you make something tonally really special, it's a classic, right? So it breaks through. And I think that, Mark and I are always interested in marrying unusual tones together and trying to sort of bring them into the world in unexpected ways. Because to me, I like that. Like, I was a big fan of Almodovar when I first started writing, and I think what's interesting about his movies is that they could be extremely funny and bizarre and strange, sexy and sad.
What's the one with the person in coma and the?
Yeah,
I mean,
Talk to Her.
Talk to Her is like exactly those tones. I mean, it's dark, Hitchcockian, but also funny and weird. And
remember, there's a scene where a secretary, she just straight up farts in the middle of a scene, and she's like, "Did anybody hear that? No, I'm good." And it's just like in the serious narrative about like death and loss and like whatever, it's like a fart. And that's like that to me. I was like, oh my god, that's Pedro Almodovar.
And I think Almodovar talks about this. He always says, well, that's life, though. Life is full of different tones. You don't. Why make a movie that just has one tone? That does not.
Just like a conversation. We're talking about something sad one moment and the loss of a parent or loss of something, and then the next is something silly. We're talking about his amazing one-man show that I'm still dying to see.
Oh, God. I'm never going to live this down, man.
You're in my brain forever now.
I'm so glad I mentioned it.
Sorry.
So good. Good to tell you.
But I mean, it's like, it's such a. I mean, Josh had been involved in many movies before, and so for me, this was like my maiden voyage, and I think it was like a really difficult kind of rocky path because it was so, I mean, the original drafts of the movie were like I mean, like as the day at Camp Bloodbath, continued. I mean, it was like it descended into utter hysteria to the point where the girls were actually like turning against each other. Where it was just like, there's a couple of us left. I am not fucking dying. You know what I mean? It became about them turning on each other, not just trying to fight. Which in a certain way is cliched. So I'm glad in a way that it moved away from that. But now I can look at it in the fact that I think when you have, we've had people come up to us and say, oh, it's like I lost someone in this movie, like I saw it at just the right moment, and it made me so happy to see this, and it made me feel better, and you just go, well, shit, okay, well then, I mean, that's pretty awesome, that's a great feeling, and it's like, I guess I'll speak for myself. I mean, Josh, maybe you agree. It's like there's some part of me that's like, oh, I would love for this movie to be like what a Christmas Story is to Christmas, like for Halloween, like it just becomes like something that's like, a slasher movie that the whole family can enjoy.
I think we've been contemplating, and then the more I think about it, the more I hear you guys talk about that tonal issue, which I do obviously live with as well, is we've been contemplating doing it as a TV series. Because we know what like part 2 would be of the movie, which would be season 2. We know we would just basically do the Final Girls movie as like the first season, so we'd have 10 hours and could really make it like haunting and strange.
Now's the time, right? I mean,
we were talking at the top of the
like
show
that.
with the Scream show on MTV and that slasher show on Chiller. It's like,
but none of them have that emotional hook that you could bring into it and maybe tell us part of the story that hadn't been seen.
Oh, to really go into all the lives of all the characters. Like we had a whole storyline for Gertie. Like she starts to get like. The movie starts transforming you into the archetypes. And their bodies change.
Oh, weird.
So all the girls were like,
So you like that?
Yeah, I like that.
Really
so like at a point in the movie, there was
need
like
to
all
do
the girls were like stopped and they were talking about something. They were like, it was like, did I go up a cup size? Like it was like, what are you talking about? What? No, don't make me look at your boobs. No, I'm serious. Did I go up a cup size? And it was just, and then Gertie, who originally was written, I mean, she was played by the gorgeous and brilliant, awesome Alia Shawkat. She was originally written to be, very much, quite overweight. And sort of not, and then that she was going to like, the movie was going to, make her shed pounds, and then she would actually turn into kind of a Heather, like she would become like sort of the bitchy girl in the movie, rather, and the Nina Dobrev character would be the one who like becomes like more meek and terrified and much more of an ally to Max. Yeah. So it became about reversals, and I think in the earliest draft, Tina was Max's mom. Not Nancy, and it was literally about like how do you protect your mom from death when she's sort of the most promiscuous character in the movie.
Oh, wow.
I like that we're on the Blumhouse desk where probably movies are pitched every day, and you're pitching the show and asking us if we. I'm like, we're going to greenlight it right here in Blumhouse right now. Ryan's not here; he can't say no. Make it so.
Exactly.
No, those are the interesting aspects. I mean, even he mentioned Cabin in the Woods before, and like to me, I love the idea of them using chemicals for like the jockey guy to sort of become the jock stereotype, and when he's actually rather intelligent. So any time you kind of reconstruct the genre, because we've grown up on these movies, we've seen them all, we've seen it all. So what's the new unique way to look at this stuff? And I think breaking it down is a great way to kind of approach it.
Yeah, I think the next wave will be radical simplicity. I think that we've gotten as sort of meta and complicated as we can get, and I think that any more is just going to start to be, I think.
Did you guys see Hush?
Yes.
Mike Flanagan film. I felt like that was a step in that way, where absolute simplicity,
very cool.
but it's still a really neat idea and executed well. It was nice to see a movie.
I just started watching this movie. I don't know if it's a horror movie yet. I'm only like halfway through. It's called Fits.
The Fits?
I haven't
heard of that.
It's a young girl. She joins this sort of female gymnastic team, and they all start like having fits one by one, and they like have to be taken off the team.
And you saw that on Hallmark?
Exactly.
Lifetime or Hallmark, which I take you throw a dart.
Lifetime does some good stuff though.
Yeah, one of them's darker. Right? I can never. Which is a Lifetime has the darker, more salacious.
Yeah.
Well, they have Unreal, which is a really good TV show. If you haven't seen it,
I haven't seen
According to this,
The Fits was directed by Anna Rose Holmer.
Yeah, I'm looking
She
at IMDb.
is someone to watch.
It does not list it as a horror. It listed it as drama. But the whole setup of it just sounds terrifying, where they all start having seizures.
It's a horror film the way Safe is a horror film.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's the scariest movie.
Probably one of the scariest movies ever.
Haynes, rather, not
I can't even like watch that movie without becoming a hypochondriac. Oh, that movie.
Now you're talking about simplicity, and I don't know this, so it's not premeditated at all. If you have worked on one, but have you guys ever approached any of the films you did like or love as remakes, or in that thought, or been asked to approach a remake, and how like you'd re-envision something you already cared about as a movie? Because obviously that's happening every day now. It's the main.
It's in process
Oh,
right now.
so that's a conversation. But and is that the first time though? Like, there's nothing in the past
Approached,
that you can say?
yes.
Approached, but never.
Oh, so I think someone brought us Poltergeist. Remember they wanted us to do Poltergeist?
Yeah, a while and we were like,
We sort of laughed in the phone.
we just started laughing. We were like, maybe we should.
You're
do
like,
that
Poltergeist 3 will do. we all love Poltergeist 3.
I mean,
Yeah,
no,
we're
that
big
movie.
Poltergeist
That movie is a classic just for Lara Flynn Boyle emerging screaming from Zelda
I know, right?
Rubinstein's
From the
corpse,
body. It's
And then he
amazing.
rips her face off.
and then he rips her face off.
What other other stuff have we been asked? I mean, we were approached at Universal to do like the Van Helsing stuff, but I just felt like I don't know how to. Did we like once again? We didn't have like a personal. It didn't hit us in a deep, fundamental way. So we're like,
I identify with the monsters, not with the monster hunter.
Yeah.
Was there a property out there in the world that you would have killed for, like had it come around?
Or still would.
in process.
In process.
Oh, look at that.
Nice.
I'm just going to hope it's the Pumpkinhead remake. because I haven't heard who's attached to that, but that'll be fun.
We'll say we're in the vicinity of it. How's that?
Yeah.
Well, what about
I'll dream.
this is kind of. Oh, I'm sorry.
No.
This is kind of obviously your love letter to 80s slasher films. What are there any other horror subgenres that would excite you guys to delve into? Like you mentioned a werewolf project earlier. You know, is there something you guys are dying to tell? A vampire story, a zombie story, something like that? Or
Good question. What subgenre we like to do? There's something we've sort of been developing that has like a supernatural noir quality to it that we'd sort of been working on with Robert Rodriguez years ago, and it was for TV. And I like the idea of taking that kind of Chinatown meets The Exorcist sort of, you know. But let me think a little bit on that.
I think if there's a genre that I love that is not something that we've really discussed or like whatever, but I was really fascinated by details of the Slender Man. I love like Fourier kind of like heavenly creatures, Swoon, Leopold and Loeb, you know, the kind of shared madness kind of stories of I just stopped, leave me alone. It's Ryan Turek. So that's definitely something that's, I would love to find something in that world because I find that, I think maybe that comes from the fact that like I grew up never feeling like I had like a super close friend. And I go, well, that's the reason. Because if I had a really close friend, then I would lose my mind and we would kill somebody, you know what I mean? Like, but yeah, Heavenly Creatures is, oh man, talk about a movie. Just
It makes me miss Peter Jackson every day. Every time I watch, I think of those movies and I go, "What happened to
He's
that
still
voice?"
around.
No, but that voice of that and her earlier films, his earlier films were so specific. And like even between that and Lovely Bones, you would think watching Heavenly Creatures, you'd go, "That guy and his wife, you know, as a team, could knock Lovely Bones out of the park," and yet completely don't. Because you don't know why. It's again, I think it's that not specific enough.
I think Lynn Ramsey was originally
She was
going to do
attached
it.
for years.
I think Lynn
Would've
Ramsey
been
is
amazing.
like truly. I mean, I don't.
Ratcatcher
know.
is one of my favorite films.
Ratcatcher's gorgeous. I think Morgan Caller is just.
We need to talk about Kevin as her dark.
Terrifying.
A lot of people were putting that on
That's
hard
another
lists.
great film.
Yeah,
So
really
great.
underrated.
When I
But she was
forgot
working
that
on it for
directed
years
that.
and then just kind of got booted and. It's just just one of those things. I guess I bet you it's the same thing with Lovely Bones. I'm sure it's like, hey, we want it to be a mainstream thing, but you can't have a mainstream thing that opens with the rape of a child. And if you take out the rape of a child and kind of whitewash that, suddenly you've lost why you're making that project because that's what it was.
Well, and
That's
also
what
this
it's
idea
about.
that the environment where she was such a happy place. I just think it really pulled all the punches out.
Yeah.
You know what? I mean, something I would love to do, but to do it in some interesting way. I miss a really, really elevated disaster movie. You know, there just hasn't
But
been.
it is the one we
Like
just watched with
Airport,
Kevin.
or-
Well, I was just about to say that. Like, it's in that realm, like those 70s, like Towering Inferno.
Or what was
Great.
the Interstate one? Interstate.
I don't know that one. I love that of an interstate.
Yeah,
Like,
it's-
I mean, see, like this is awesome.
What's the Gene Hackman one with the
we
boat?
just what was the one we just
Poseidon.
Poseidon,
Adventure.
Poseidon, yes.
Oh, that's
Well, it's
we
also
just-
because they had
we just watched
interesting
the
characters.
Is there a
right?
way
All
to
those
do
weird
it
characters.
all those movies? Like there's disasters happening
Yeah.
in all those places
Everywhere
at once?
simultaneously. That'd be great.
Yeah.
Now I have
We
to
saw
look up the
San Andreas.
interstate one.
The Rock one.
Yeah, and God, I love
San
The
Andreas.
Rock, but like, I mean, it was really like it felt like
also
fascist
looked really
propaganda a little
Yeah.
bit, like the onus on like it's about the family, save the family,
Yeah.
like the weakling stepfather who's like mew mew, I'm rich and I'm thin and I'm gonna go like like I'm gonna like kick an old lady into the street, to, like while a bullet, while like a boulder's flying at her, like it was just so like.
I miss when
And
we
it
had
was-
two at the same time every year. It'd be, this year we get Dante's Peak and what was the other one?
Volcano.
Yeah, Volcano at the
Dante's
same time every
Peak.
time.
You had
Did you ever
Armageddon
see
and
Miracle
Deep
Mile?
Which
Impact.
I called Anne Heche
One of my
versus
favorite
the
movies.
Volcano.
I love. You're like the only person I know that has seen this movie.
It's recently come out on Blu-ray. Steve DeJohn is the director, and it just came out recently. Amazing extras, everything.
Seen that. Wait, which one?
Miracle
We're
Mile.
going to Amoeba tonight.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Miracle
it's
Mile
so
is
it's so
awesome.
awesome. And in LA,
Yeah.
it's like that whole area of LA. Every time I pass that diner, I'm like, it's Miracle Mile.
I think we need to remake Miracle Mile.
Yeah, that would be an interesting one. I mean, it's a film with it's a very dark. It takes you to a very
Hey,
dark
the
place,
diner's
which is
still there.
surprising.
I think like one of the more interesting versions of a disaster movie that recently in recent years is The Mist.
Oh yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Mist is
Because
great.
at least it had the audacity to have that.
Yeah, it goes
fucking
all the way.
ending.
Yeah.
Holy
We were just talking about seeing it in
shit.
black and white for the first time recently, and how much better. Like I couldn't even believe how much it improved. Like
I
just think
haven't
about
seen
the
it in
tone
black
and
and
look
white.
of the film.
I haven't
Yeah.
seen it in black and white.
Yeah,
Yeah, the
Watch
Blu-ray has the black and white version, which is the way Darabont
Wanted
intended
it.
it to be originally.
Studio didn't like that idea.
it. So they made him shoot it in color.
Yeah, but then he turned it.
Promise.
He did more than just turn it to black and white. They actually went into the elements and changed things the way you manipulated it properly. So it's a real. It's not like just flip your TV to black and white now. It's like they painstakingly made it the way you want it to be seen. It. The effects look so much better.
Yeah,
It's just so much
in
more
black and white.
organic to what the idea of the
That's
story
what
was.
Mike Nichols, he had to fight the studio on Virginia Woolf. They were like, "Oh, shoot it in color," and then we can change it to black and white. And he was like, "Nice try."
The interstate disaster movie is called Smash Up. Oh shoot, I just lost it.
Into the mic, Becca.
Smash
Into the
Up.
mic.
Smash Up on Interstate 5, and it stars Tommy Lee Jones.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
Was it like in his like
So
Eyes
it's
of
a-
Laura Mars like hot Cro-Magnon
Yeah,
phase?
it was like his
looks
manly
like a
man
hot
phase.
caveman
It's very
in a
late
suit.
70s, if I remember correctly. I haven't seen it in a long
I
time.
am seeing this
but
movie.
it's pretty amazing. And I always liked Deep Rising because it felt like a disaster movie, but it had like giant squid monsters in it
that
too.
period, yeah.
So yeah, it was definitely in that realm.
Look, I'm a big, speaking of Karen Black, I'm a big, she would hate me mentioning this movie. I'm a big fan of all those airport movies. They are awesome. There's
no one left to
but
fly
something
the
that
plane.
feels like immediate and could happen. And I just remember watching those movies and and was it Concord? I mean,
Concord 70s.
79.
Eight, nine.
Oh,
I
it's
love
79,
those
for sure.
movies.
I love that they like dated them.
Yeah, I
They were
know.
like,
It's like
Concord 79.
Yeah.
like, what, okay.
Dracula AD 1972 or whatever it was. You're like,
Oh,
that year.
Disco Dracula. I love Disco
Oh,
Dracula.
it's amazing.
Yeah,
I put when we were doing a list on Blumhouse.com a couple of weeks ago, I put Airplane on it, and I realized after I did that film does not resonate with contemporary audiences because they have no idea what it's spoofing anymore. And so since we don't have those like airline themed disaster movies anymore, the whole kind of concept of the plane crashing or the plane being out of control, it's like the spoof element is gone because the source material is gone.
Oh, but it's
Because
so
now,
funny.
like,
that movie's great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
endangered flights are part of like a different narrative. Like, I mean, even in the
Yeah.
Rings trailer,
Right,
it's
yeah.
like Samara's on the plane now.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And so it's like,
Samara's on the plane. Sounds like a Samuel L. Jackson
Yes.
movie. Samara,
Get
too many
these
Samaras on this motherfucking plane.
right, exactly. So
I
you're
wanna see
right.
that
It's like
trailer.
now it's not enough that a plane is crashing. It has
Yeah.
to,
Samara needs to be on it.
Samara.
Yeah.
God bless her.
We tend to ask everybody that comes in, but what are some of the contemporary horror directors or films that have really stood out for you guys or excited you? Like what have you seen lately that you just really dig?
I love this movie. I can't pronounce the name correctly, so excuse me. It's this movie that I saw. There's a bunch, obviously. I love this movie, White God. Is that it?
Wait.
White.
White
my God.
Just saw it. Yeah.
About the dog?
The dogs?
I thought it
The
was
French one?
Yeah.
Oh,
I've heard it's really cool.
mesmerizing and
Austrian or something, right? Maybe?
Yeah.
Austrian.
Yeah.
I want to say Czech, but
But if you ever
Or
travel this
Czech.
country, there are dogs like everywhere. Like,
And
you know, there's Hungary as well.
The second half of the movie is so haunting and beautiful and unlike anything I'd have ever seen. I mean, the premise, right?
Yeah, I've seen the trailer.
Yeah.
I got to watch it.
You know, these dogs are these fighting. They're used for fights, and they decide to revolt against the city, basically, and become this revolutionary war. It's phenomenal. Like some of the visual ways they were able to convey these packs of dogs attacking the city. It's just lyrical, and it has political ideas behind it. I mean, it's all obviously about, the underdog, and sort of this.
Now probably you could project onto it, right?
We were all wrong. It's Hungarian.
I said that first.
we're all
didn't I?
Yeah,
ugly
that was
Americans.
It's like Casablanca. It's all a border.
Exactly. Oh my God, that's hilarious. So I don't know why that hit me really hard. It has not left me, and I feel like that's in the genre in a way.
Oh yeah.
Oh, yeah.
on
It was
Netflix.
considered a horror film when it came out
It's
in
on Netflix.
2014.
Highly
Yeah, I'm
recommend.
gonna check it out.
I think the last ecstatic experience I had in a movie theater was Jonathan Glazer's Under the Skin.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Talking
think-
guy.
Huh?
Yeah, he asked
like
me about
his
this.
favorite.
I mean, that's probably
Oh,
my
yeah.
favorite of the decade. I mean,
think
when I think
it's-
about a movie that just is like so different.
Yeah,
You know?
I think it's I mean, it's like really easy to be like I was speechless, and it's like whatever. No, but like that movie really like hit me over the head. Like I was just in a daze.
You know how
by
they
the
say
end of that
movies
movie.
bring people together and they connect you to the world? When I saw that movie, I felt so alone. I've never felt more alone than the end of that movie. I don't know what that means, but it made me feel more like it was an isolating experience, not a connecting experience. Like it felt, I don't know what it was. There was something about this character and this birth of empathy that gets put out. This little flame, and I've never felt quite like that.
Well,
at the
I mean,
end of a
because
movie.
it's about like a nefarious alien being whose downfall is becoming like us.
Yeah,
is becoming,
and yet you feel, yet you give a shit, right? After all that.
it literally destroys her. It's like taking on our qualities.
Yeah.
So it's like it's such a downer.
The
but
book
so
is. I
gorgeous.
tried reading the book and I couldn't even get halfway because it was so on the nose with the idea of we're gonna kill men and make meat and stuff for our people. It just didn't. But then the movie, the director, I guess, there's a great interview on the Projection Booth podcast with the guy who originally wrote it with him, and he was very upfront about it. He's like, I wrote this thing. It was very much like the book, and then Jonathan just couldn't. He just could not make that movie. He said it's just not right, and he disappeared for years. And then like 5 or 7 years later, Jonathan Glazer just pops up with his draft, still kind of based on their draft, and the writer was very cool with it. He was like, look, he was gone on to a lot of other great stuff, so it didn't matter, but he was like, Jonathan Glazer had to unlock the riddle that was that movie for himself, and it was a visual thing, and he did, and that's why I think it resonates, I like it.
No, it makes me want to revisit it again. Sometimes when like Mark is so in love with something, I'm like, I can't love it that much.
Yeah.
Do you know what it's like?
Yeah,
you and
yeah,
your
yeah.
friends. Sometimes someone said, "You got to listen to this band. It's the best. It's the best." You're like, "Let me come to it."
Yeah.
Obviously, I love that movie as well, but to the degree that Mark, I think Mark.
Try doing a show with Elric.
Yeah, Elric gets really
Very passionate
impassioned
about
about
these movies.
certain movies
wonderful.
that I'm kind of like, but he really, really loves them.
I'm somewhere in the middle. I don't
Yeah.
know,
You
kind
know
of.
what I watched again just recently, and I think it qualifies as a horror movie in its own right, is Elephant.
Oh yeah,
And that is just exquisite. I don't know. I'm kind of like revisiting a lot of like somnambulist horror. Like I'm like now there's like we have on our coffee table the Blu-ray of Picnic at Hanging Rock, just and it's burning a
ending
hole
of
in
that's
it. Like I'm
great.
just like I can't wait to watch it again. It's been years. I can't wait.
I thought, it's interesting. I feel like Steven Soderbergh made a horror movie these last 2 years with The Nick. I feel like that show
I haven't really watched it.
is about the body and the horrors of the body and the tragedy. And there was there's more blood in that than I've seen in most horror movies. I mean,
I think that they actually realize that as well because usually, like just going off the marketing materials that I receive, it's always horror. But I receive promotional copies of The Nick. And for them to like reach out and send it to a horror writer, I mean, they knew what they had.
Yeah, no, because ultimately it's about the tension of our relationship to death and our body and all the different things that could happen to the body. I mean, that's incredibly interesting, and I think that the way he shot it and the music and So to me, that would be up there as well as something that really, in a contemporary way, that really hit me.
And I think in terms
Even
of
more so than I love and appreciate Stranger Things, but I feel more connected to the Nick. To me, that blew me away more.
Okay. Is there anything that you guys are working on now that you are able to talk to? I know there's always stuff kind of up in the air, and but what are you excited about? What's coming up next?
Well, I mean, we have a TV show that we created that's on USA right now called Queen of the South. It's a female Scarface set in Texas. It's in its 9th episode this week, and I would say most likely going to have another season next year. So that's out there, so you can watch that on iTunes or USA. We're doing another show for the same network and studio. That's
Bravo, not the same network.
It's not the same network. Well, but they're all like merging. Anyway,
No, it's like they've all
I get confused.
Kind of
Which is another TV show that's sort of a female Mad Men set in New York in the 80s. We want to definitely write about women in trouble. That's what we like to do. So these women in New York in 83 it's very much about second wave feminism, women in the workplace, all that sort of
broadcast news,
working girl.
Mm-hmm. 9 to 5.
Oh, hello.
I mean,
One of the great
not
movies.
as like fantastical as 9 to 5. It's definitely
totally
like it's
not like that. No.
Yeah, but
they
I
dreamed
mean,
of
but
being
of
9 to
course,
5.
like you gotta tip the hat to 9 to 5.
We're trying to be very sophisticated. It's a drama.
Okay.
So we're prepping that. Hopefully that'll be made. Hopefully by the end of the year. Hopefully if everything goes right. And in terms on the move, and then there's another show we're going to do right after that, but that's not announced yet. And then a movie we're writing, a big dark comedy, a bunch of movies for Warner Brothers. I don't think we can talk about them.
I mean,
I don't think we're allowed to talk about them, but they're really cool movies.
One of
there's a lot.
one of the producers is, well, we could say that.
Well, he's starring in Robert Downey Jr. and
great.
yeah,
and his partner and wife,
Susan's
the
producing it.
redoubtable
It's for
Susan
Warner Brothers. It's a big, dark. I said big, meaning like it's not. It's like a big concept, but it's a really intimate movie.
It's called The Great Pretender, and that's it.
It'd be good to see him. He's like, always been, I think, the best actor of his that generation.
I believe that,
And I actually think similarly about Nick Cage, but that certain people, they have to make, decisions to be in certain types of movies and work with certain directors. But with Robert, post-Marvel, it's like he hasn't gotten to do any of the kind of movies that I've always loved him doing for so long. I can't wait for him to get back. And what was it, Two Girls and a Guy? I remember one of his last ones. I was like, Jesus, he's such a good actor.
The Pickup Artist.
Yeah,
Remember
Pickup
that movie?
I mean, so many movies.
No,
So
he's really magical to work with, and he's brilliant. He has so many great ideas, and he's very inspiring to collaborate with. So hopefully, if Warner Brothers doesn't make it, someone else will.
Cool.
And it's a role for him that I think is like exactly what you're talking about. I think that he will be phenomenal in. So
That's awesome. Well, thank you guys so much for coming down. I'm glad we can
thank
make this
you.
happen.
Thanks for having us.
we
And,
feel honored to be part of an illustrious group of people who
The shockwaves, the shockwaves,
deep end
family
we are
are
honored.
The deep ends of horror.
And now you must die.
The deep end is the only place to be. It's the deep end.
Yeah, exactly.
Nobody wants to be in the shallow part.
No, definitely not. Well, we appreciate you guys coming on. If you haven't seen The Final Girls, check it out. It's out on Blu-ray now. And we'll see you guys next week.